Duxbury, Massachusetts, a quiet seaside town, was shattered by an unthinkable tragedy. Lindsay Clancy, a young nurse, devoted wife, and mother of 3, was seen as the picture of perfection. But police say behind the smiles and family photos, darkness took hold. On a cold January night, investigators say she strangled her children, Cora, Dawson, and baby Callan. All that before attempting to take her own life. Clancy's husband, Patrick, returned home to a scene of unimaginable horror. Now, the once trusted nurse faces murder charges, as her defense claims she suffered from severe postpartum psychosis. Prosecutors call it calculated. Her attorneys say it's a symptom of a mind lost to illness. Tonight, the question tears through this small town. Was Lindsay Clancy a monster or a mother broken beyond repair? So let's begin here. The response to the scene. You're going to hear from the prosecutor describe what they believe happened here, beginning with the husband, the father coming home, and then emergency workers responding. Take a listen.
Patrick can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children. His screams seem to get louder and more agonized as the time passes. Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them. Dawson and Callan were face down on the floor. Cora was on her side with her torso turned towards the floor. He removed the bands and begged them to breathe. He continued to scream uncontrollably and screamed for officers to come to the basement. The dispatchers are hearing this and they send help down to the basement, and when they encounter Patrick, he yells out, "She killed the kids."
I don't think anyone can imagine this scene. Brings us to the first question in our investigation. What happened? What happened here? Let's bring in some guests who will help us work through this. Joining us, registered nurse Kim Whalen. She's also known as Nurse Kim on TikTok and on YouTube. And criminal defense attorney Dwayne Cates. Great to have you both here. I think this is a difficult case to talk about for everyone. It's a incredible tragedy across the board. But before we start our discussion, I just want to give the folks at home a little more information as we listen to the prosecutor lay out some of what they believe happened here.
On the morning of Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, the defendant took her 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to the pediatrician's for an appointment. She interacted with a receptionist, nursing staff, and a doctor. There were apparently no issues with the defendant's demeanor or behavior, as she completed the appointment and was allowed to leave with Cora without any issues or concerns. When she returned home, she went outside with Cora and her 3-year-old son, Dawson, to play in the snow. They built a snowman. The defendant sent photos to her mother and to the defendant, straight that to her husband. She texted with them. Nothing in the text was out of the ordinary or any sign of any distress or trouble. Back inside later that day at 4:02 p.m., the defendant searched on her phone Kids Miralax. She then searched that Takeout 3V via her cell phone at 4:13 p.m. Immediately after doing that, she used Apple Maps on her phone to determine how long it would take someone to drive from her home in Duxbury to 3V restaurant in Plymouth. So she would know how long someone would be gone if they ran that errand. She next went on the CVS website at 4:47 p.m. and then called CVS on Summer Street in Kingston. She spoke to the manager of CVS and asked if they had the Kids Miralax. The manager told her no, but they had other similar medications. According to the manager of CVS, her voice did not sound slurred or impaired in any way. She had no trouble understanding the defendant, and it was a perfectly normal conversation. At 4:53 p.m., the defendant texted her husband, who was working in his home office in their basement. She texted, "Any chance you want to do takeout from 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." This was an unusual request, as when the family ordered takeout, they'd usually go somewhere closer to home, but it was a place that they had been in the past. Patrick Clancy texted back yes, and then the defendant asked him to check the menu. At 5:06 p.m., the husband texted the defendant asking what she was going to get. She responded, "A Mediterranean power bowl." She spelled it correctly, and it was something that was on the menu. He then told her that he wanted the scallop and pork belly risotto. At 5:10 p.m., the defendant called 3V Restaurant to place the order. She got the order correct. She gave the correct name for pickup, Patrick. The hostess who took the call said there was nothing out of the ordinary about this call. She was able to understand the defendant, that her voice was not slurred or impaired in any way. At 5:15 p.m., Patrick Clancy headed out the door to run these errands at the defendant's request. As he left, she texted him Pedialyte liquid stool softener. Surveillance footage shows Mr. Clancy at CVS on Summer Street in Kingston at 5:32 p.m. He goes to the medication aisle, the children's medication aisle. Phone records show that he called the defendant at 5:33 p.m. and she did not answer the phone. She then calls him back at 5:34 p.m. and the call lasted 14 seconds. He's there at the store unsure of which medication to get, and she tells him exactly what she wants. He had no issues communicating with her. It was a completely normal call, although he did mention that she seemed like she was in the middle of something. He is on surveillance footage during this time, exiting that aisle and appeared to be using his phone. He then heads to the register, makes his purchase, and leaves the store at 5:37 p.m. He's next seen on footage at 3V Restaurant at 5:54 p.m. He picks up the food and he's out of there within a minute. When he arrives home, the first thing he noticed was the silence. He did not see or hear the defendant or the children. He actually called her cell phone at 6:09 p.m. looking for them, and she did not answer. He went to their bedroom on the second floor and the door was locked. He was able to open it, and when he looked inside, he saw blood on the floor in front of a full-length mirror and the window open. He immediately runs downstairs and into the backyard, where he finds the defendant laying on the ground. She appeared to have cuts on her wrists and neck, but he stated to 911 that those wounds were no longer bleeding. She was conscious. He called 911. During this time, he asked the defendant, "What did you do?" She responded to him, "I tried to kill myself and jumped out the window." During the 911 call, Patrick can be heard asking the defendant, "Where are the kids?" He later told police that she replied, "In the basement." So immediately after this happened, she knew what she had done and she knew where the kids were.
Okay, Kim, let's go through this. It seems like she is planning this out. It seems that she has the appearance of being lucid, of being aware of what's going on, and takes care of the kids first, then jumps out of the window. What are you seeing happening here?
Yes, unfortunately, Vinny, that is what it appears. An unthinkable tragedy in Duxbury, Massachusetts. And I can't imagine her husband, Patrick, returning to that scene, to Cora, Dawson, and baby Callan. Now, yes, it appears there was a plot or a organized effort for him to go out and to get food that was not a regular request. And then it is very concerning that when she is answering the phone upon being called at CVS regarding the Miralax for the children, that she was appearing to be in the middle of something. And that would likely have been when her children were no longer going to be on this earth any longer. So, you know, there is a lot to unpack here of what was happening. Was there any auditory hallucinations? Even though she was able to have proper speech patterns, that could have been something that she was dealing with in a short period of time that could have caused this if it was truly a postpartum psychosis, which is only rare and affects 1 to 2 women out of 1,000.
Dwayne Cates, if you look at it on paper, right, before you pull back those layers, like Nurse Kim is talking about, pulling back the layers, if you're just looking at what happened here, this looks like, I hate to say ordinary, not ordinary, but like a standard. We've seen this with families before, a murder-suicide situation. And this is one that seems to have some level of planning to it all to get the husband out of the house.
Yeah, and unfortunately for her, trials in criminal cases are about what things look like, some more than what they really are, because some of these things could be coincidences, but when you lay it out the way the prosecutor laid it out, it's pretty damning. But again, that still doesn't rule out a psychotic break, from postpartum depression. I mean, number one, normally sane people don't do this. So there's clearly a psychotic episode that happened. Is it something that could be used for her defense? We'll have to see what the experts say.
Yeah, Kim, the level of tragedy here is so deep, so deep. But the victims are all young, super young, innocent, loving, attached to their mom, I'm sure, like all the time. That's what kids do. They just cling to their moms, and for good reason, right? For good reason. And there's some level of this trust being broken. I'm really troubled, though, by getting him out of the house, and then, but at some point, if you're planning this, you're going to realize that he's going to come home to this. And it seemed like the plan was to come home to 4 dead bodies.
Yeah, that is what it appears, Vinny, that the end goal was not only for the children or whatever had taken over and command. Sometimes you have command hallucinations. And Lindsay also did leap from a second floor window and has resulted in she's paralyzed and inpatient at Tewksbury State Hospital since 2023. This is an unimaginable loss for a family, a community, and a bigger picture. As an RN, knows where to go and is aware of the signs, and it still was insidious and crept in and caused a tragedy that no one will forget.
Dwayne, and when we saw the court appearance, when we were watching the prosecutor detail everything, and we had that split screen up, that was a zoom from the hospital room where the defendant is. There she is. And she's paralyzed. The jury is going to see everything that happened to her, but she's still alive, and the 3 children aren't. What are your thoughts there about that, the end result? Like, able to kill the children, but not able to kill herself?
Well, and some of the reporting I heard was that she kind of hung and dropped. It wasn't like a full-fledged headfirst leap when she jumped out the window. So was it a real suicide attempt, or was it a feigned suicide attempt for sympathy? Nobody knows. And again, this case is full of what are criminal defense attorneys call bad facts for Lindsay, because this really looks bad. I mean, the getting the husband to go run the errand and then killing the kids while he's gone is a bad fact.
Well, what we're going to do when we come back is do what Nurse Kim started to do, which is pull back the layers on this. Up next, what was going on inside the home?
She made a posting on Facebook about a month or so prior to this, indicating that she felt that she was anxious and depressed because of postpartum.
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions. How do you explain it? The worst crime anyone can imagine. Do you feel like you took the fall for this murder? Tell me in your own words, What happened? Let's get started.
Interview with a Killer. New season premieres Saturday, October 25th. Only on Court TV.
She's 32 years of age, Your Honor. She met her husband. He was the love of her life. They got married. A wonderful young couple. And as counsel noted, she always wanted to have kids. Always wanted to have babies. She's a nurse. She went to be a midwife because she wanted to help other women.
All that's true. All that is true. Let's peel back those layers right now and take a look at Lindsay's medications. This is from a search warrant. Patrick Clancy stated that Lindsay went to a psychiatrist who he identified as Jennifer Tufts and was prescribed Zoloft. Patrick Clancy stated that Lindsay also saw another psychiatrist who he identified as Rebecca Gelada. Patrick stated that Lindsay was also prescribed multiple other medications. You ready? Time to make a list here, including Valium, Trazodone, Ativan, Klonopin, Prozac, and Seroquel. Patrick stated that Lindsay would take as many as 4 medications a day. However, she would take them as prescribed. Patrick stated that Lindsay stated that she had been having suicidal thoughts as well as thoughts of hurting the children. Lindsay had self-admitted herself to McLean Hospital from January 1st of 2023 through January 5th of 2023. Then it was on the 23rd when all of this happened. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. What was going on inside the home here? It seems that there is some level of acknowledgement of a problem. Back with us to help, registered nurse Kim Whalen, also known as Nurse Kim on TikTok and YouTube, and criminal defense attorney Dwayne Cates. That list of medications, Nurse Kim, what are your thoughts when you hear a list that long?
Yeah, I have concerns with a list that long, and especially with a mother with 3 babies. It ranges from benzodiazepines to antipsychotic medication in Seroquel. And it also makes you have a little bit of a pause when you think about Lindsay self-referring and admitting to McLean's. This wasn't a Section 12 where she was taken from the community. She requested the help. And 5 days later, on the 5th, she is discharged to home with all of those medications and told that she's going to be getting better. Unfortunately, that did not occur. And we know the result that happened less than 2 weeks later.
Yeah, Dwayne, here's some more information from a search warrant. Patrick stated that he and Lindsay had an amazing marriage, got along great. He further stated that they tell each other that they love each other 10 times a day. Here's from a GoFundMe page. She loved being a nurse, but nothing matched her intense love for our kids and dedication to being a mother. It was all she ever wanted. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. So how important is this picture, and what picture does this tell, ultimately, to a jury?
Well, it tells the picture that what happened when she killed the children was not the normal Lindsay. I had several cases like this with a long list of medications where a psychopharmacologist that's knowledgeable about all these medications and their interactions with each other. And I've actually had cases dismissed because I was able to prove that the side effect interactions of the drugs matched exactly what happened in the crime. In other words, the side effects of the drugs caused the crime. And again, it sounds like she's a pretty normal person, and then she's taking all these drugs, and then all of a sudden she's got these suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations, checking herself into mental institutions. This is a case where you got to get a psychopharmacologist to look at all those drugs. And even though she was taking them as prescribed, if you take them as prescribed, but they have interactions with each other, that can be a really big problem. And I've seen it cause extremely bizarre behavior before.
Yeah, Kim, I go back to this. This is the part that strikes me, that she's communicating these thoughts that she's having beforehand. She's communicating these thoughts that she's having before she self-admits to McLean Hospital. And I'm trying, like, if someone is planning and plotting a murder, you're not telling everybody your plan and your plot. That's the problem I'm having right now, Kim.
Yeah, absolutely, Vinny. It just doesn't make sense if you're trying to get help and you're trying to get better and you're noticing the change. You are seeing this, but I truly believe it's so sad that in the year 2023 or even now in 2025, that mothers that are experiencing this, either a postpartum baby blues, postpartum depression, or in the most extreme cases, postpartum psychosis, that you have a fear of a stigma attached to it. So when she went and was discharged from that mental hospitalization on the 5th of January, I think she just perhaps tried to pull herself up by her bootstraps. And as our other guest said, very important to look at the interactions of those psychiatric medications that she was placed upon when she was discharged.
The evidence is overwhelming, but a conviction may be difficult. Here's the story. They were the family everyone admired. Lindsay Clancy, a labor and delivery nurse, her husband Patrick, and their 3 bright, smiling children. But behind the closed doors of their Duxbury home, a mother's silent struggle with postpartum depression was spiraling towards tragedy. On a January night, prosecutors say Lindsay methodically planned her children's deaths, using exercise bands to strangle them before leaping from a window in an attempt to end her own life. In court, her defense paints a chilling picture of a woman lost in the fog of postpartum psychosis, over-medicated, unheard, and unraveling. The courtroom is divided between compassion and fury, faith and disbelief. As the case moves toward trial, one haunting question remains. How could love so pure end in something so devastating? It's a murder case. It'll be a murder trial. I want to take a moment here to listen to the prosecutor lay out their theory of this murder case.
The children were killed by ligature strangulation. Ligature strangulation causes the victim to become unconscious anywhere from 10 seconds up to a minute. The more the victim struggles, the longer it takes. After the victim is unconscious, the ligature must be held in place with force, squeezing the neck for up to an additional 4 to 5 minutes to cause death. Therefore, she had to strangle each of them to unconsciousness and then make sure the bands were squeezing their little necks for several minutes. She could have changed her mind at any point during that time and removed those bands from their necks, and she did not. The defendant did not take advantage of the situation when her husband left the home that night. She created the situation, and she used Apple Maps to make sure she would have enough time to strangle each child before her husband returned from where she had sent him. The defendant is a danger to herself and others. She planned these murders, gave herself the time and privacy needed to commit the murders, and then she strangled each child in the place where they should have felt the safest, at home with their mom. She did so with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity and cruelty.
You can hear the prosecutors is very clear on what their case is here against Lindsay Clancy. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about the other side. What's Lindsay Clancy's defense? What's the response, right? The evidence is overwhelming, by the way. for them to prove that, but there will be a defense here. Here to help answer that question is psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey, and Boston attorney, former prosecutor Catherine Loftus. She's also the host of Note My Objection podcast. Great to have you both here. Let's take a listen to Kevin Reddington. We've covered many of his trials through the years here on Court TV, going back decades here when I was a young correspondent for the network. Here he is kind of laying out what I believe is a big part of their case, some of the facts they believe help the defense.
They put her on a number of medications. They put her on Prozac, which Your Honor is well aware is what's known as SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Your Honor knows that along with some of these medications, they have the black box warning from the FDA, may cause suicidal ideation, may cause homicidal ideation. She was on Ativan. She was on Benadryl. And then she ended up being told, okay, because she was complaining about the effects of the Prozac, they said, stop the Prozac, we'll find something else. They put her on Remeron. Then they added on Seroquel. And Your Honor, I attached from David Benjamin, the toxicologist, some papers with the submission, and Your Honor can see the side effects that this Seroquel causes. She was having bad thoughts. She was having worsening depression. Her husband suffered through that phase. Her parents were well aware of the fact that she was suffering from this depression and depressive phase. She wasn't sleeping. This is a significant issue between the postpartum depression as well as possibility of postpartum psychosis that is pretty much ignored. But nevertheless, with the overlay of the SSRIs and the history, and Your Honor has some emails and things that people would reach out to me from all over the world indicating that their daughter had the same problem, that they had the same problem. Your Honor is well aware that many times when people are on Prozac or on SSRIs, workplace violence, homicides, family homicides. This is clearly a tragic, which is a word that's used too much in the criminal justice system, but this really is a tragedy, this case.
She's in a very surreal state. It feels dreamlike to her, as she's described to me on multiple occasions. And individuals who can present as being lucid and linear and clear thinking do not make those people not mentally ill. They have the capacity for, on occasion, to be able to do things that they've been doing for a long period of time. When you have delusional thinking, fixed beliefs that are unchangeable, and hallucinations, namely command hallucinations, telling you to do things that are malevolent, and you believe those voices that are telling you you need to follow what they say, that's when things go downhill.
Okay, Dr. Janie Lacey, I want to begin with you. Postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, the medications she was given, yet still appearing lucid and making decisions at the same time. What are your thoughts about all of those items in play?
My thoughts, Vinny, about what you just mentioned is it's not necessarily abnormal. So when we think about postpartum psychosis, we know it's very rare for one, I have to say that, but it is a severe mental illness. And about 4% of people that are actually diagnosed with it actually commit homicide. But I do think it does confuse people because of exactly what you just mentioned, is we look at it almost when we think about a lot of the mothers that we work with. A lot of times there is this, and we actually call it the smiling depression, because it's known as the smiling depression because many mothers try to put on that happy face, even when they're suffering and making detection difficult. But I think what I understand in this case is that there is documentation that she was reaching out to get help. And there was a lot of things that were missed in particular. And when you were sharing about the clip about the medication, 13 medications over a 4-month period of time, I mean, I could just understand that there would probably be some over medications, and I would understand why the defense would be looking at that, because a lot of times when things are not properly diagnosed, it cannot be properly treated. So if there was a proper diagnosis, there could be proper treatment, especially over that year period of time of her mental deterioration, Vinny.
Okay, Catherine, how do all these issues that Dr. Janie Lacey has laid out manifest themselves inside the courtroom for the defense in this case?
Well, how it's going to look logistically is that the defense is going to put on basically a case that she's not criminally responsible. Obviously, everybody who's watching this case, the jurors who sit on this case are going to know ultimately the responsibility lies with Lindsay Clancy. There's no dispute as to that. Kevin Reddington has filed a notice of lack of criminal responsibility. Essentially what that claims is that she suffered from a mental illness or defect in which she substantially lacked the capacity to understand the criminality of what she was doing or to conform her actions with the law. And what that then does is it forces the burden on the Commonwealth, not only to prove that she is the person who committed these crimes, but also that she did have the capacity to understand what she was doing, because ultimately it will end in what kind of sentence does she get. You know, this is not a case in which she's going to be found not guilty and walk out of a courtroom likely ever. This is really a determination as to whether she serves her sentence in a state prison or in a mental health facility. And so that's how we are going to see the case actually play out at trial.
Now, let's listen to the prosecutor here, right? Because as Catherine pointed out, it's up to the prosecution now to prove that she was thinking clearly, knew what she was doing. Take a listen to this, Dr. Janie Lacey. I want to get your reaction to the prosecutor laying out what they believe the facts will show.
In the months, weeks, and days preceding January 24th, 2023, the defendant meticulously detailed her daily activities, her children's lives, her mental state, and her medication use. Her writing was clear, precise, and articulate. She never indicated that she was hallucinating, delusional, or had disordered thoughts or speech. In all of her writing, she appears to know who she is, where she is, the date, and with whom she's interacted. Using an erasable whiteboard because she was still temporarily intubated, one of the first questions that Lindsay Clancy asked was, "Do I need an attorney?" She knew that she had murdered her children, and she had the clarity, focus, and mental acumen to focus on protecting her own rights and interests. During this call, the defendant stated that after he left the house that night, she killed the kids because she heard a voice and had, quote, a moment of psychosis, end quote. He asked her what voices she heard, and she said she heard a man's voice telling her to kill the kids and kill herself because it was her last chance. Patrick Clancy told the police the defendant had never heard voices before. He also told the police the defendant had never used the word psychosis to him before.
All right, Dr. Janie Lacey, what are your thoughts here about allegations? First time she mentions hearing voices, is meticulously writing everything down, doesn't talk about hallucinations. Does that jive?
Well, it does, Vinny. When we look at psychosis, there's usually, especially because she's had mental health services before. So I would be interested to see what those mental health professionals have documented, because hallucinations and delusions are one of our primary features when we consider the psychosis part of it. And then we would also be looking at, you know, her mood swings, and her husband would probably be the one that can also talk about what we call mania, right? She's feeling high and overactive, and then a depression. But one of the other key things that we would be seeing, and I would imagine the prosecution is also looking at this, is that symptoms of psychosis, they typically begin 2 to 3 days to 2 weeks after childbirth, and they can appear up to, you know, we would look at 12 weeks of postpartum. So it could be during that time period. But on the other hand, Vinny, we also know that a lot of mothers don't talk about it because there's so much shame around some of the hallucinations or delusional thoughts that they have. And then, you know, I would imagine either her husband or the mental health professionals can document, did she talk about insomnia? Did she talk about confusion? Because sometimes confusion is delusion and it is hallucinations, but when clients come in, they will describe it as disorientation or they have difficulty remembering things. But that should all be documented because of the services that she received up to the year before the tragedy.
All right, let me ask you this, Catherine. If the jury believes that she was hearing a voice, and the voice said this is her last chance, is that enough? Does that meet the burden if the jury believes it? Is that enough to eliminate the criminal responsibility, keep her out of prison and send her to an institution?
It may be, you know, the question of criminal responsibility is a difficult one. It's a legal term, and there is no one definition that a attorney or a judge can present to a jury to say, if so-and-so is diagnosed with this specific disorder or psychosis, that means you must find them not criminally responsible. So it's really, some of this goes into sort of the gut feelings that jurors have, you know, their own common sense, which they're often told to use, you know, about motherhood, about what's happening, you know, what's going on in somebody who's having a mental health crisis. And ultimately, you know, like we said before, this is a tragedy. It's not going to bring, you know, there's not going to be a resolution to this case, whether she's found to be criminally responsible or not. There's no real, you know, sense of justice in a tragedy such as this. So it'll be interesting to see, but ultimately it will be sort of a gut call from the jury.
Do hope that a plea agreement could be reached. Would that be the best way to dispose of this case?
I certainly do. And I'm hoping that Tim Cruz, who's a former defense attorney and DA for a long time, would be able to understand this is just a tragic case that really should be resolved without the fanfare of a trial. Bringing it in motion.
That's Kevin Reddington, the attorney for Lindsay Clancy, saying, yeah, there should be a deal here. Hasn't happened. I want to put this on the screen. This is from an interview from the New Yorker magazine with Patrick Clancy, the husband, the father. Patrick said, I forgive my wife, and I do. I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick. Patrick Clancy's new apartment in Midtown Manhattan looks much like any other tidy bachelor pad. There's little on the living room walls. For months, he was consumed with the thought that nothing was left. He took a solo trip to Central America and then to Europe, staying in youth hostels to avoid the sight of vacationing families. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? That brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about the dad. How does Patrick Clancy move on? How do you move on from this? Here to help, still with us, is psychotherapist, CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey, and Boston attorney, former prosecutor Catherine Loftus, also the host of Note My Objection podcast. Dr. Janie, I'll begin with you. How does this dad, I still call him, he's a dad. You know, once you're a dad, you're always a dad. How does he move on?
You know, Vinny, this is a tough one. You know, Patrick, his journey forward to me just represents just an extraordinary test of just human resilience and forgiveness in the face of what is unimaginable to any of us. But as he's choosing forgiveness over anger, as you just put up that quote that he wasn't married to a monster, right? That perspective just frames his what I would consider his entire approach to healing. Rather than harboring like any type of anger that we're seeing, he's choosing to view the tragedy through the lens of her mental illness. And from what I understand, he's maintaining connection with her. And even though he's physically relocated and started over, you know, as you just mentioned, in his apartment, you know, there's no house anymore. There's no kids. And that's all that's left is just him and Lindsay. And then I believe he was honoring his children's memory when he ran the Boston Marathon. So keeping their memory alive and turning that into purpose and action. And I believe he's also advocating for mental health awareness. So he's expressing and he's doing things to keep his children alive. He's, you know, forgiving the unforgivable for most people. And he's living with complex emotions that we can't even imagine, right? But he's acknowledging being self-conscious about that emotional state, you know, Vinny. So
and it's not even we can't imagine
really
it. It's like we don't want to imagine it, right? We don't even want to go there. Before we run out of time, Catherine, what impact do you think the dad will have on the case, on the administration of justice here ultimately?
I imagine he would have a significant amount of impact on the jury. You know, as he stated in his interview with the New Yorker, that he wasn't married to somebody who, was homicidal, who was hateful towards their children. He was married to a woman that he loved, was a professional, was hardworking, was a mom by who all accounts loved her children. And so I think that sort of presentation of who Lindsay Clancy was, not in this moment on this terrible night when she decided to take the lives of her children, but who she was, throughout their relationship will have quite a bit of an impact on the jury.
Dr. Jane Lace, we have about 30 seconds left here. Looking at his future, he's still young. Would it be a positive or a negative for him to start another family someday?
I think it can absolutely be a positive, but that would probably be after he really takes some time to grieve after the case is over, right? Because his story just challenges those conventional notions of just grief and forgiveness in the wake of a family tragedy. But I do believe, and we've seen it, people have found love again, and they've created something new without forgetting what has happened.
All right, and obviously we're staying on top of this story in this case as it gets ready for trial. Catherine Loftus, Dr. Janie Lacey, thank you both so much. Great to have you here. The only cases that come to mind in my history here at Court TV where a jury has found someone not guilty by reason of insanity, not finding them criminally responsible, are two cases involving two moms who committed mass killing of their own children. Andrea Yates and Deanna Laney claimed they were ordered by God and believed they were saving their children when they took their lives. So the question is, will this jury believe Lindsay Clancy didn't think she was doing something wrong when she took the lives of those three young children? Lindsay and Patrick Clancy were living what looked like from the outside an amazing life, raising three beautiful, wonderful children. But that ended on January 24th, 2023, when Lindsay Clancy did the unthinkable.
She had to strangle the kids to unconsciousness and then keep strangling them for additional minutes.
Instantly, she became portrayed as an evil mother charged with the murders of three innocent little angels. But that story changed when her husband, Patrick, and her defense attorneys revealed what was going on behind closed doors.
As to postpartum depression, psychosis, the concerns and the fear that a woman has. But a woman who has suffered and has put up with this affliction.
And now as the trial begins, the question looms, will the jury excuse her behavior and find her not guilty because of her postpartum psychosis? I keep saying it, this is the biggest trial of the summer and a tragedy on such an enormous scale. We're talking about three children just wiped out. How much did they suffer? And how about Lindsay Clancy and postpartum psychosis? Will it really prevent her from being able to control herself, prevent herself from killing her own children? I'm Vinnie Politan. Let's investigate. There is no doubt that this is going to be an intense trial inside the courtroom. The debate outside the courthouse is already intense. Inside, it is going to be through the roof. And I think for prosecutors, it's all about how much did they suffer, these children, what it took to take their lives, how you wrap those exercise bands around their throats until they are dead. To me, that is such a big part of this case, and we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the postpartum psychosis. That's the defense here, and it's real. Like, this does exist. The question is, did it exist to the level where Lindsay Clancy could no longer control her own actions, and she felt compelled to take the lives of her three children? Well, it's going to be up to 12 people who will decide this in the jury. And that jury selection is underway and ongoing up at the courthouse in Plymouth County, Massachusetts. And that's where Sierra Gillespie, the host of Law and Crime's Scandal, joins us now. Okay, Sierra, take us inside the courtroom today. What's the big headline so far?
Well, we have our first juror of the day that has been seated, Vinny. At the time of this recording, that brings us to 13 jurors. Now, this most recent juror, he is a man. He's white. He's, 50 to 60 years old. I actually saw him in the hallway before. He seems pretty talkative. The things I overheard from him is that he works the second shift, but he doesn't think that this is going to affect his work in any way. And the questions that the judge asks, such as, the defendant has the right to testify. She also has the right not to. Would you hold it against her? And he said, no, absolutely not. So it kind of seems like both sides were really into this guy. Of course, they seated him. That brings us to number 13. And when I spoke to the defense attorney this morning, he said he is pretty confident that the jury will be seated today.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they're moving along very, very quickly. Do we know if there are any moms on the jury so far?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I know that there are some women who are seated on the jury. It's actually almost 50-50 at this point. I don't know for a fact if they're moms because, in the courtroom, they're doing the white noise. I can't always make out everything everyone's saying. But honestly, the odds are that at least one is a mom. I just can't 100% confirm. Okay. So how about Lindsay Clancy? Things are getting much more real now. You've got the jury selection wrapping up. Soon this trial will begin. Any change in her? What are you noticing from Lindsay Clancy? Yeah, this was interesting from yesterday to today. I spoke with you yesterday and we talked about how Lindsay was, I'm not going to say catatonic, but looked very, kind of glazed over eyes, very stone-faced, not much emotion at all. I mean, some people even alleged or speculated rather that she was under some sort of medication. But today it's a lot different. I mean, we're seated in this courtroom. It's kind of, it can get monotonous. It can get, long. And she's doing things that all the rest of us are, like, fixing our hair, kind of like scratching, kind of fidgeting, looking around, like just kind of like a normal everyday person at this point. She's listening intently and is very, very close to these prospective jurors when they're being questioned by the judge in both the Commonwealth and the defense. So she's right there in the mix of it. And it seems to me that she is following along with what they're saying. And it's interesting, right? Because she may or may not testify. There's a good chance that she won't testify. I think that's with every criminal defendant, right? But to see her in a position where, hey, everything is at stake here, like the rest of her life, what it's going to be like, whether she's in a wheelchair in prison or whether she's in a wheelchair getting psychiatric treatment or potentially in a wheelchair free someday. Everything's at stake. Does the weight of all of this look like she's wearing it at all? I mean, I think you're right. She definitely has to be feeling the weight of all of this. It's her life literally at stake here. Is she going to be in prison or is she going to go back to Tewksbury Hospital? What's ahead for her? And I do see in Lindsay, I'm not sure if it's just the general events that happened back in January 2023 or the fact that she's now confronted with all of them in front of a jury of her peers, the world, because of course we'll be live streaming it. But you can see her, kind of tense in her shoulders. Just looking at her body language, I'm not an expert in all of this, but if I was the defendant, I would be, shaking. I would be terrified. And you do kind of see that in her. I don't know if she's actually going to take the stand. Honestly, I've hardly seen her talk. I don't know kind of what her level is at this point. I don't know if she's under a lot of medication, whatever, that's all speculation. I've only seen her have a couple sentences with Kevin Reddington, her attorney. So I'm not sure if she actually will take the stand at this point, but I think the heaviness of what happened and confronting it now is really weighing on her. And I'm interested in your observation from being up there. What has surprised you the most so far since you've been at that courthouse covering this case and the story that we've been covering now for years? Well, we talked about this. I kind of expected that there would be some supporters here. We cover these trials. Sometimes I'm there and there are people who are literally trial watchers, fans, people who want to be part of it all and come into the courtroom, and sometimes they're, against the defendant or for them, whatever it may be. But in the case of Lindsay Clancy online, there's been a lot of moms who have come forward, other nurses who said, she was under this postpartum psychosis situation. That's why she did what she did. We're here to support Lindsay Clancy. And, dozens and dozens of notes were written. There were social media posts, all of the things. And it's just kind of shocking to me that I haven't seen any of those people here to support her. The only supporters I've seen from her are her 2 nurses, obviously, from the hospital. And then she has her 2 parents, mom and dad, who are pretty unassuming, kind of nice people, and her grandmother. And that's really it. So I was kind of shocked that there aren't people here who want to see this outside of all of the reporters. There hasn't been any, normal everyday people as we sometimes see in jury trials, but maybe that will change when opening statements are presented.
Absolutely. Sierra Gillespie in Plymouth with the story. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vinny.
So I want to play for you something that was said by the prosecutor early on in one of the early hearings in this case. And I think when you listen to what she says, this really became the driving force behind the murder charges in the case against Lindsay Clancy. Let's take a listen.
The children were killed with ligature strangulation. Ligature strangulation causes the victim to become unconscious anywhere from 10 seconds to a minute. And that depends on how much the victim struggles or fights. The more they struggle or fight, the longer it takes. Dawson had the most petechiae on his face and neck. According to the medical examiner, this means Dawson either struggled or fought for his life more than Cora or Calvin were able to, or that she strangled him harder than the other 2, or both. And it takes 10 pounds of pressure at minimum to strangle. After the victim becomes unconscious, the ligature has to be held in place with that same force for an additional 4 to 5 minutes. She had to strangle the kids to unconsciousness and then keep strangling them for additional minutes.
I want to get a little more context and perspective on what we just heard and what was described by the prosecutor. How did these children suffer? Joining me is a good friend, you know him very well, Joseph Scott Morgan, death investigator, host of the Body Bags podcast, and of course, works and is such a big force over at Jacksonville State University at their Applied Forensics Center, doing incredible work there. Joseph, great to see you.
Good to see you, man.
How much did these children suffer in the moment that their mother took their lives by taking that exercise band around their throats one at a time?
Markedly. And there would have been an awareness too then, because the thing that strikes me with this case is the fact that these are exercise bands. So that means that there's a bit of elasticity to them, right? So it's hard to gauge the amount of force that it's going to take because of that elasticity. So you have to continue to apply force over and over again. This is different than, say, for instance, using say like a leather belt or a bit of wire, that's very kind of static. You know what I'm saying? So, and there would have been the struggling, and also, people that have not involve themselves in this kind of event before, which we can't really say that there are that many, hopefully, unless they're trained assassins. You don't know to what degree you're going to have to go to. So many times with these kinds of cases, you'll see them go over the top, right? There'll be a tremendous amount of violence here. And the one child that was being referred to, this is significant, and I'm glad that you played that clip, because the number of petechiae that you're seeing presenting in this child, I think, can be a measure for the amount of force that was used. And also that goes to length of time. And that's what we're getting at here. And I'm not saying that there's any, I don't know really how to put this in delicate terms, but there are certainly more merciful ways to take someone's life than this. This is out of the pantheon of things that you and I have covered over the years. Strangulation, ligature strangulation, can be one of the most horrific events because the individual lingers. They don't die immediately then, and that's what's very striking here, particularly when you consider that it's at the hands of their mom.
Yeah, the mom. Now, the youngest child, the baby, actually survived a couple of days afterwards. Are you surprised, or why would that be?
No, I'm not necessarily surprised. And just so that we understand the mechanism, it's not just about the airway, right? It's about the arterial and venous system that is in here. So what happens is that as a ligature is being applied, it's not just clamping down on the trachea, all right? It's also being applied to the vessels that run on either side. So what you're doing is you're literally clamping off the oxygen supply to the brain. You know, the brain, and I say this all the time, the brain is the most vascular organ in the body. And I think that many of our friends out there may have experienced like syncope before, where, you know, you get kind of lightheaded like this. Some people might have passed out. Maybe you've had a medical condition. You know what that feels like. You don't die, but that lightheadedness would have initially been part of this, in addition to the horror of the struggle that this child would have gone through. But there's just enough blood flow to keep them alive. But the higher brain functions have been diminished to the point where the child is just going to slip off, and it's non-sustainable after a period of time. Okay, and they would have had to have probably taken some life-extending measures in order, just holding out hope. You know, we always want to have hope, really, particularly for our kids. You know, that they're going to survive, and he was too far gone.
Now, something else the prosecutor said, 10 pounds of force. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that to us, and how much force and for how long that force has to be applied? You
know, they're talking about 10 pounds of force is kind of a relative term because this is a dynamic event. So she is not going to be applying 10 pounds of force consistently. Okay. That's kind of that hard number that we have in forensics to get an idea as to how much force it would take theoretically to rob somebody of their life. Okay. It's not like you've got a vice where you're tightening down a vice and you can set it at that point. It's not what we're talking about a kid that's struggling, fighting, okay, to stay alive. And you've got a mother who allegedly wants to end that life. So it'll go in degrees. You know, it might go down to 2 pounds all the way up to 15. All right. So it's going to be this kind of push and pull like this. If you think about 10 pounds of pressure that you would have to consistently apply, I don't know really how to say in terms that people would understand how that would feel, but it would be the top end of what the average person could apply with the grip of their hand. Okay, for a sustained, for maybe just a couple of minutes, and then it's going to relax, and then it's going to go back in, and again you'll have this kind of fluctuation in the pounds per square inch that you're having to apply to this area in order to constrict those vessels to the point where you're going to kill them, or get into the airway itself and shut that down as well, because you've got two elements that are working here. We're taking in breaths, and then we've got our blood flow, which we don't think about, but that's going on as well.
Joseph Scout Morgan, always great to have you on with your insight, and so we understand the reality of what happened. Appreciate it, sir.
You're quite welcome, Ben.
So Lindsay Clancy's defense is lack of criminal responsibility, which is the Massachusetts version of insanity, right? And under Massachusetts law, the standard is that she cannot control her actions as a result of what she's suffering from, her mental condition. She cannot help herself. Even if she knows what she's doing wrong, she can't stop herself from doing it. So in this case, obviously, it's postpartum depression versus postpartum psychosis. I want to get a better understanding of it, so I want to bring in a special guest joining us. Licensed clinical social worker, author of Thriving After Trauma, Stories of Living and Healing, Shari Botwin is with us. Shari, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So take us into this world. Like, for years, we've heard about postpartum depression. I'll be honest, this is the first time I'm hearing about postpartum psychosis. And my presumption and assumption is that it's just a a much higher level. Give us a little bit of the background. Like, do we know why this happens?
Postpartum depression can happen very often. It's when somebody has a baby, there's all kinds of chemical and hormonal imbalances. So the difference with postpartum depression is it can happen over the course of time, and it can hit someone not necessarily just the first week or the first month, but someone within the first year after giving birth can develop postpartum depression. Postpartum psychosis is an onset, a very sudden, it's almost like an explosion. One minute you could be doing very well, and then maybe within 72 hours after giving birth, it can feel like a psychotic break. It's the way I think of it, it's like a mental health emergency. Someone goes into crisis and they lose their ability to have basically their wits about them, even if there's a part of them that knows something's really wrong. Why am I having these horrible thoughts? The feelings that someone experiences during that psychosis, they're so strong and they're overpowering.
Let me ask you this, because this is a big part of this story in this case, is that the alleged planning that she did. And prosecutors are going to say, listen, she sent her husband out. She sent him away. She was calculating how long he would be gone, how much time she would have to kill the 3 children. If you're in this postpartum psychosis, could she be under the psychosis and do the planning and do the plotting and remain calm and cool as she gets ready to take the lives of 3 little children?
When she's at that point, while it feels like she's premeditating, it's calculated, what you're describing is someone who's experiencing psychosis. So it's not just something that happens and then 30 seconds later the thoughts or the feelings end. When I hear the story of what happened at this point on her journey, what it sounds to me like is because there was no intervention, and at that point it almost feels like it was too late. She was so enveloped by the illness that she stayed in a place of mental illness and unwellness and craziness. She could, on some level, think to herself, why am I doing this? And I need to ask for help. But the way I look at it is that the unwell part of her completely took over. And at that point, it was too late. That's why when we talk about postpartum psychosis, we say it's an emergency, because if somebody doesn't intervene, the second someone is in that place of psychosis, there's going to be something awful that could happen. And that's what this story really shows us.
Let me ask you this about postpartum psychosis. The focus of the feelings. She has 3 children, right? 3 different children, different ages. Yes, there's a baby, but there's 2 others. Yet it seems the violence was aimed at all 3 children, not her husband, but all 3 children. Would that be unusual? Or not just the focus on the child that was just born, but on the older siblings, yet none of that towards her husband?
When we think about the story again and the facts that we're hearing, what she's describing, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about this at trial, is that it's not even just about the children and ending their lives. She was planning on ending her own life. So in her mind, the story was all of my children need to be gone, and then I need to go away with them. So I think in this particular case, while it's awful and it's devastating, it doesn't surprise me that that's where this went.
For someone who's in the midst of this, and she did attempt to reach out. She voiced the thoughts that she was having in her head. She went to different doctors, different nurses, 13 different medications.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the interaction of the medications and different people treating her through all of this?
I mean, I have so many thoughts. The thing that I think about is this is a woman who really tried on many levels to get help. She did all the right things. She went inpatient at one point. She saw doctors. She took, like you said, 13 different medications. She was screaming out for help in so many ways. And my thoughts about this are, I know a lot of women who start to experience postpartum and they say to me, I think I have this, but I don't want to ask for help. I'm embarrassed. Doctors aren't going to listen to me. I've worked with clients who have clearly had postpartum, but then when they go to the doctor, they're dismissed. So in this particular case, this woman and her husband, from what we've heard, were both advocating for her to get the appropriate intervention and the support and help that she needed. So I think what happened with the medication, and I have seen this too, medication can be a wonderful support for people, but it doesn't work for everyone. There are some people who actually get worse when they're on different types of medication. So in this case, it feels like a lot of the information that she was presenting either wasn't heard or got dismissed in some way. But I feel like this is a story that we really need to learn from, because she is someone that did the things that you're supposed to do when you're starting to feel like you're losing your mind. And by the time this crime happened, she had already done so many different things, and she'd exhausted many of her supports, and the illness just got worse and worse and worse. And that's why we're sitting here today talking about this horrible tragedy.
Shari Botwin, appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this jury, they've got to look at this tragic disintegration and blowing up of a family and try to figure out why it happened and whether or not she should be held criminally responsible for her own actions. They're not in dispute what she did. It's why she did it and what was going on in her mind. Now, what's interesting in this case is that Lindsay's husband, Patrick, is standing by her side. He has asked people to forgive her. He's forgiven her. He is supporting her. We expect him to testify for her. So this is the man in the middle of everything who will be a big part of this trial. Someone who lost his 3 children, but was living in the middle of all of it. And not only as an eyewitness, but as someone who understood what was going on and what the dynamics were in the household and what was going on with Lindsay Clancy in terms of her depression, mental illness, etc. He's crucial to this case. And it's going to play pretty big, like really big for a jury, because they're going to look to him. Okay, well, what does he want to happen in all of this? And it might give them an opportunity to say, well, if it's okay with him, then maybe we should be a little more open-minded about this child killer. You know, it's different than what happened in the Andrea Yates case, and she was found not guilty in Texas, but her husband wasn't as sympathetic as Patrick will be in this case for Lindsay. Rusty showed up at the courthouse. Yeah, he was there. He said certain things, but he was in a much different place than this husband, than this father. But despite that, Andrea Yates was found not guilty. So there is a real trial that's going to happen here. I have no idea what the jury's going to do with this evidence. And we got to see how it all plays out. But it's all about Lindsay Clancy's postpartum depression, or perhaps prosecutors will say alleged postpartum depression. How serious was it? How real was it? And how do you convince a jury of that? Well, what the defense wanted to do was put up other mothers who suffered from this, parade them into the courtroom so the jury could understand a firsthand account of what it's like to suffer from postpartum depression and the thoughts that you have and how it impacts your decisions, your moods, everything that you do. I've never seen it done before, but this is going to be a very aggressive defense. So they went in front of the judge to try to convince the judge to allow these women to come into the courtroom and testify about their own experiences and not just rely on what some doctor or expert is going to say on the witness stand. Let's take a listen to the arguments being made by her attorney, Kevin Reddington.
Mr. Reddington, this is the motion to eliminate to permit testimony from witnesses who have themselves been, according to the motion, victimized by the medical system regarding the issues of postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Your Honor, as I say in the affidavit, and as you can well imagine, I have been contacted by many people who have, in a very moving, emotional fashion, advised me of these horrific issues that they've been dealing with postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, hearing the auditory commands, having intrusive thoughts to hurt or kill their partner or their children, infanticide, as a result of postpartum psychosis, medication issues, contributing to the postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. And it's so easy for us as a society to say in a troubling case like this, oh my God, she's guilty, throw away the key, put her in jail and just be done with it, because it makes everybody feel better. It's a feel-good reaction that, okay, somebody has been punished because of doing a very bad thing. But as we know, when you're dealing with the issues of lack of criminal responsibility, I don't like the term insanity, but nevertheless, when you're dealing with somebody who is suffering from a medical a defect or a disease, and they have actually experienced something that is so outside the ken, if you will, of jurors, of normal people, for us to believe that somebody's hearing voices, the initial reaction from any one of us, I think, in this courtroom would be, come on, you're not hearing voices. What are you talking about? You're making this up. You're trying to avoid responsibility. But it is true, and it happens, and it is an affliction that people have put up with. And if they are permitted to testify as their experience themselves as to postpartum depression, psychosis, the concerns and the fear that a woman has, and I say as a woman has because guys don't know about this. You know, we're so quick to go out and we're mighty and strong. We have many beers, and we're real quick to say, throw away the key on it. But a woman who has suffered and has...
This is interesting. This is really interesting. Now, the arguments he'll be able to make, what he's trying to do is not rely on just an expert, because you know when one side hires an expert, the other side hires an expert, and they never agree, right? So a jury's got two experts, both qualified, both experienced, and they're saying different things. Whereas if you have the first person accounts, it seems much more powerful. But this is unusual. This is Kevin Reddington. This is not the norm. Like, I've never seen it in my years, like the use of a witness in this way. So what he's saying may very well be true, that he has all these women lined up who've experienced the similar things. The question is, should it be allowed in a courtroom? Is that the way we decide whether or not Lindsay Clancy was hearing these voices? Whether Lindsay Clancy should or should not be held criminally responsible? Little slight difference, but what he's saying, if this judge allows it in, powerful evidence. Let's watch.
Put up with this affliction should be able to testify and say, probably in an emotionally charged fashion, very credibly, I too have heard these command voices. I too acted on the command voices. I too have had insomnia. I too have had hedonism where I don't even care if I live or die. I have no emotion. I can't feel. I can't laugh. I can't love. I can't hate. And I think that that is important. Now, before I disclose the identity of these people, it seems to me that what I have to do is present the general legal issue to you as a preliminary gatekeeper almost, where you would say, hypothetically, I think upon sufficiency of proof, it is admissible. And I am inclined, you the judge, to allow that evidence before a jury, at which point I would then, of course, disclose the identity of the people with their knowledge and consent, their medical backgrounds, and the government can then send their cops out to interrogate them or intimidate them or talk to them or do whatever they want to do. But if they get on that witness stand, they have credible evidence to give. So it's a two-part. I can't.
You see what, and this is it's going to be like this throughout the trial. I mean, he's really good, Kevin Reddington. He kind of just slides in there. Oh yeah, the government can send out their investigators to intimidate them, like presuming that they're going to do that they're going to act poorly, that they're going to act badly. We are in Massachusetts, though, so there is a history, right, from the Karen Reed trial. But at the end of the day, It's interesting to see the way that he frames everything that he puts in front of the court, because he'll be doing the same thing in front of the jury. Let's watch some more.
Really give their names and addresses without knowing. You may say, as a matter of law, it's not admissible. Somebody's individual experience with a narcotic, with a drug, with a disease or a defect is not admissible in a sense of the specifics of a trial. And if that's the case, then it shuts down the issue, and that's the end of it. But I had to raise the issue preliminarily.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll incorporate what I said before about Rule 14 and the lack of notice in the 1 week prior to trial, but also defense counsel cites no rule of evidence that would allow for the admission of layperson testimony about these issues. He cites to the battered woman statute, but in that statute itself it refers to expert testimony, not laypersons saying, I had this experience, so the defendant must have as well. And then I think what we come to is it becomes more prejudicial than probative in that say you allow 16 people to come in and testify to that, then the Commonwealth gets to rebut that with their own witnesses, women who suffered from postpartum depression and psychosis, who did not kill their children, who locked themselves in a room to keep themselves from harming their children, who got in a car and drove away so they didn't harm their children. And so then it becomes a trial within a trial. And it's more prejudicial than probative. There's no rule allowing the admission. And it would delay the trial, in all honesty, because then we would be filing a motion for discovery on these witnesses, their medical records, having them interviewed by police, which would take time. So I would object to this motion.
I'd like to know who these people are that were locking themselves in rooms and getting in their cars to avoid killing or hurting their children.
Just go on Facebook. They're all over.
But isn't that the whole problem? I think what the Commonwealth is saying, that this isn't just a trial within a trial. It would be 16 trials within this trial. I understand the argument, especially the kind of comparison to the battered women syndrome. But as those cases develop, I'm sure Mr. Reddington may remember, as those cases that became more and more admissible, it really hinged a lot upon the testimony of experts. And in this case, I anticipate there's going to be experts that are going to talk about the reality of this postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. So that's coming out. And these are testimony that will come from the experts, I think, on both sides. It doesn't seem like there's a question of whether or not postpartum depression or psychosis is real. I mean, all the experts seem to agree that it's real. So because of the ability to get the probative part of what those women would bring to the court, the experts can give that. And so I'm going to deny the motion at this time.
And again, it's not shocking because I've never seen it done before. But could you imagine that moment in a courtroom when you have woman after woman after woman talking about their own experiences? I mean, to a certain extent, it is sort of enlightening. But then when prosecutors said, well, we've got a bunch of women who say the opposite, who were able to control it and were able to get away so they didn't harm anyone. But there was one common theme there, and the judge jumped on it. Like, see, both sides are agreeing that it seems this does exist. We're not going to be debating whether or not postpartum depression exists or doesn't exist. The question is, does it become so overwhelming that you cannot control what you are doing? You have this irresistible impulse to act. You're not in control of your own actions. And that's where the lack of criminal responsibility starts to take hold. And that's what this case is going to be about. So yes, the experts will have a lot to say about this, but a lot of it is going to be grounded on her particular case. Because I think at the end of the day, what you're going to find is that the experts will sort of agree to a certain extent. And then the question is, how much of a hold on Lindsay Clancy did these thoughts have? Did this mental illness have on her? And I think what you're going to come down to now is, okay, well, what was she able to do? What was she able to control? And while the defense will say, listen, those voices are pushing her. She can't feel, she can't hate, she can't love, she can't cry. She's like nothing. And she's just acting as a result of the combination of the medications and the postpartum depression. But prosecutors are going to say, listen, this was planned. This was plotted. This was premeditated. Like, she set that whole day up by sending her husband away to run 2 errands, to pick up some medication at the CVS and then to pick up dinner. And she knew how long it would take. She went on her computer to figure out the distance and the time of travel, planning how much time she needed to take the lives of all 3 children. And that's what prosecutors say. Listen, she's able to do all of that and function very well. She takes a phone call in the middle of all of it from her husband. No indication that she's like broken from reality. She's in complete control of what she is doing, and she knows what she's doing. And she's taking, all the actions to make sure she completes the mission that she was planning, which was killing all 3 children that day. So this is going to be more than an ordinary battle of the experts. It's going to be next level, because there is a history here that I'm going to get into for Lindsay Clancy, and an acknowledgement by her that she was ill. In many cases involving legal insanity or lack of criminal responsibility, we don't have defendants who actually had episodes or thoughts or were being treated for anything. She is being treated. And that's what makes this different. So you can't say that she's not suffering from anything. You can't say that she's making it all up. The question is, how much of an impact does it have on her thought process and her ability to control her own actions? And something Kevin Reddington said there was interesting, because it gets down to jury selection. He seemed to think the skepticism will come from men. I don't know. I think there might be some skepticism from some mothers who never experienced this. And there may be some who did experience some thoughts, but never acted or did anything as a result. So I think it's a real case-by-case basis. And I think the voir dire process and figuring out, the experience of all the potential female jurors becomes huge in this case. Whether they're a mother, especially ones who've had children, what were their experiences like? For men, we can't relate to it. So we're coming into this with almost a blank slate, and we're going to have probably be more influenced by the experts than any mother who was on that jury. On the day of the killing, Patrick Clancy was out picking up something at CVS, picking up dinner, and then came home. And what he came home to was absolute horror, right? Tough spot, real tough. Discovers his wife first. But the 911 call that was made is so important in all of this. It's kind of like the initial reaction of the husband, Patrick. You've got him, but you've got him discovering the children and trying to put together the pieces of what happened inside the home when he was just gone for that short while. So there was some pre-trial objections, et cetera, about whether or not and what the jury will get to hear concerning the 911 calls. Now, the 911 calls have not been played publicly yet, but we do get an idea of what's contained in them from both the arguments in court and some of the papers that have been filed in the case. So I want to go through that so we understand what this 911 call will reveal. Let's start by going inside the courtroom. We'll take a listen to the Assistant DA, Jennifer Sprague, making the arguments about the 911 call.
is the Commonwealth's motion to eliminate to admit the 911 call made by Patrick Clancy.
She had a Creighton motion that I have no objection to.
Oh, I saw that. Okay, yeah. I'll get to that. Yeah, I saw that with the number of individuals. So I'll allow that as well. All right. And then in regards to this, which is pleading number 103, the motion regarding the 911 call. Kamal?
Thank you, Your Honor. So the first issue about confrontation won't be an issue because Mr. Clancy will be testifying at trial. As to whether this is an excited utterance, as I lay out in my motion, Mr. Clancy calls 911 when he finds the defendant in the backyard on the ground. You can hear him relaying information to the 911 operators. They're asking about her injuries. He's saying that she has cuts on her wrist and neck. They're telling him to apply pressure. He's telling them they're not bleeding. I don't need to do that. So it's about her treatment. It's about her condition. It's the ongoing emergency.
I could cut to the chase on this. If I can, I apologize. I want to interrupt your
Go right ahead.
presentation. I'm very familiar with the law as well as the facts in this case. And this 911 call, which I would, as lawyers always do, object for the record, as we say. But I'm going to concede that the case law is overwhelming, that if the person is making a statement under the stress of an emotional event, which this is, obviously, the person making a statement on a phone to 911, which are routinely admitted in trials. I'd be wasting the court's time if I was to object and have a hearing. And so I don't have an objection to that. I have an objection to it being admitted just because it's horrific, but legally I have to concede that there's no basis to object, so I would have no objection.
All right, so my inclination is, and I apologize, I had the motion. I didn't realize that I had the copy of the 911, so I haven't heard it. And so in regards to if it's admissible based upon prejudice against the probative value, that's what I'm going to have to listen to.
You can play it now. I don't have a problem.
No, I'm not going to play it now.
I mean, at some point, if it's coming in, it's going to be coming in.
There's a dynamic right now in this moment beyond this particular issue. Prosecutors making her arguments, and Kevin Reddington, the defense attorney, stands up and then takes over. The judge is issuing a ruling. Kevin Reddington gets up and starts to take over. Like everybody in the courtroom knows that he has the most experience of anyone in the world of criminal justice in Massachusetts, right? He's well respected, et cetera. But just that dynamic, the ability to take over any moment, even like the prosecutor is making her argument to the judge and he's, well, you know what? And then he basically concedes because the issue, but takes over the courtroom. Again, something you're going to see throughout the course of this trial. Now, as to this issue, he doesn't have a problem with it being played, which is interesting, because it's going to have an impact on this jury. Let's listen to some more.
Coming in this courtroom, so I don't have a problem.
Well, that's for another day. Especially where I've got to listen to it to see if all of it's admissible, some of it's admissible, or portions of it, just like any type of evidence. But my inclination is, from having read it and being aware of it, is that I'm inclined to allow all of it. But before it goes in front of a jury, I just kind of want to make sure that I've kind of vetted it.
Okay. So he's going to listen to it. Now, we learn a little bit more about this call from the papers that were filed. And this is from the motion. Mr. Clancy calls 911 at 6:11 from his home after having returned from errands and requested by the defendant. At the beginning of the call, Mr. Clancy can be heard trying to obtain help for the defendant. That's what we heard them talking about. While speaking with the dispatcher, Mr. Clancy also spoke to the defendant. He asked her multiple questions, and she was able to respond to some of those questions. Mr. Clancy is heard on the call asking the defendant about the whereabouts of the children, who he had not seen when he returned home after being gone for 45 minutes. After emergency services arrived on the scene, the emergency nature of the call did not end, as the Clancy children still had not been located. As the 911 call continues, Mr. Clancy is heard entering the home, calling out for his children, and then finding the bodies of Cora, Callan, and then Dawson in the basement of the home. Mr. Clancy then yelled for help in the basement. The police on scene responded to his cries for help. As the police headed into the basement, Mr. Clancy yelled out, and this is probably the most dramatic moment in this 911 call. "She killed the kids." That's part of the call that they're going to hear. She killed the kids. Well, it's not up for debate in this case, right? Whether or not she did or didn't, but it's still powerful evidence hearing the father, the husband, screaming that during the 911 call. Then as the call progresses, you can infer when Mr. Clancy finds the body of each child as the volume of his voice rises and falls. Wow. The timing of when he found each child and the manner in which they were discovered is probative of how they were killed. And then it gets on. Cora, Dawson, and Callan were each strangled with a separate exercise band, and the band used to strangle each child was found around their necks by Mr. Clancy. First responders then found each band lying next to each child when they reached the basement because Mr. Clancy had removed the bands from the necks of Cora, Dawson, and Callan as he found each of them. And that's what the jury's going to hear during this 911 call. I cannot stress enough how important it is for the defense in this case that Lindsay Clancy has a documented history. But it's not just a documented, like, historical history. It's also a very recent history. And Patrick Clancy and has filed a lawsuit going after those who were treating and prescribing medications to his wife, the mother of his children, the mother who took their lives. So you can tell what Patrick thinks here. Like, he's blaming the doctors. He's blaming the medicine. He's not blaming his wife. He's not blaming Lindsay. So in that civil lawsuit, there's an outline of what their alleged facts are. And I say alleged facts because I don't think the other side in the civil case will concede that this is all the truth. And I don't think in the criminal case either, because the prosecution in prior hearings has disputed some of these allegations being made. But these are the allegations of the defense. This is what you're going to hear during the criminal case. Okay? This will be the foundation and the basis for this lack of criminal responsibility, legal insanity claim by Lindsay Clancy. So I want to go through it with you because I think it's detailed and it does provide her with some credibility in making this allegation from the defense perspective. All right, during Lindsay's first pregnancy with Cora, she experienced anxiety. She experienced some anxiety during the postpartum period, but returned to part-time work and breastfed for 1 year without incident. So first child, it seems everything's okay. After her second pregnancy, anxiety emerged at approximately 2 months postpartum. Although Lindsay was offered Zoloft by a psychiatrist, she declined due to concerns about breastfeeding. Okay. So the first two children, she does experience some symptoms, but it's not serious at all. Lindsay gave birth to Callan on May 26, 2022. Lindsay demonstrated significant activation and hypomanic behavior, including an extensive program of exercise beginning only 1 week after delivery. At approximately 12 weeks postpartum, Lindsay's mood switched suddenly to anxiety and depression. She experienced debilitating anxiety, insomnia, sleeping only approximately 3 hours per night, and exhaustion during the day. Recognizing that something was seriously wrong, Lindsay took the initiative to seek psychiatric care. This is huge. She is realizing something is wrong. She is seeking help. At her first appointment with Dr. Tufts, Lindsay's Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, EPDS score, was 23, indicating severe depression. Dr. Tufts prescribed Zoloft, despite Lindsay's hesitation because of the breastfeeding. After increasing Zoloft from 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams, Lindsay experienced a severe adverse reaction. She did not sleep for 48 hours, had racing thoughts, worsening anxiety, and felt awful. Lindsay promptly reported these symptoms to Dr. Tufts in October of 2022, and Dr. Tufts discontinued the Zoloft and prescribed Ativan and Benadryl for sleep. On November 16, 2022, Lindsay's insomnia had become so severe that she took herself to the emergency room at South Shore Hospital seeking help. The ER doctor prescribed trazodone for sleep, but it was not effective. Nurse Paul prescribed Prozac on November 21st, 2022. After 4 days on Prozac, Lindsay reported that the medication intensified her insomnia. She immediately informed her providers, and the Prozac was discontinued. This was the second antidepressant that had caused activation and worsening insomnia, a critical red flag for bipolar disorder that the providers failed to recognize. Bipolar disorder, postpartum depression. On November 25th, Nurse Paul prescribed 3 different medications, Ambien, Remeron, and Klonopin. On November 26th, after taking Remeron, Lindsay experienced dissociation, perceiving the world around her as unreal, distorted, and distant. She was unable to determine what was real. She became disoriented, forgetful, confused, and disconnected from her own body. She was unable to drive and unable to be alone. These symptoms, if a jury believes them, are really the framework for lack of criminal responsibility. On November 29th, Lindsay began treating with Nurse Gelota. Lindsay reported that she was anxious and frightened about what was happening. She blamed herself. Nurse Gelota correctly considered a bipolar presentation and prescribed Seroquel, an antipsychotic and mood stabilizer. After starting Seroquel, she developed suicidal ideation and began experiencing what she described as intrusive thoughts, which were actually auditory hallucinations. The voice said, "I will not be the same. I want to die." Now we're up to the next level of providing the type of evidence, if a jury believes it, that would equal lack of criminal responsibility. December now. Lindsay was so frightened by the hallucinations, she called the suicide hotline. On December 6th, Patrick attended an appointment with Lindsay with the nurse, Gelota, and connected Lindsay's suicidal thoughts to the Seroquel. Lindsay is 10,000 times worse since she's taken the medication, and asked if they could get Lindsay off the medication and start from scratch to see what's going on. He asked if there could have been some mistake using the wrong medications. The husband, Patrick, is questioning it. Nurse Gelota acknowledged it's possible. Despite this, they continue to increase the Seroquel dosage towards 400 milligrams per day. So now you've got the husband also on board, Patrick, that these medications, they're making everything worse. The defense has somewhere to point the finger, pointed at the nurse, pointed at the medication. December 15th, Patrick called the nurse's office to report that Lindsay had a devastating week. Lindsay had hallucinations all day. They were loud. "I will never be the same. I will never be me again. You are damaged. You will never be the same. Your only option is to die." Lindsay told her husband, "I have thoughts of harming the kids." Boom. She also told her mother about these thoughts. Will the mother come in and testify about this as well? Because she was in a psychotic state, Lindsay also had paranoid delusions that people could hear her thoughts and that she'd be locked in a hospital and have her children taken away. Lindsay's escalating suicidal thoughts prompted a visit to the Massachusetts General Hospital on December 20th. So now she's hospitalized. December 21st, he admitted herself to the partial hospitalization day program for women and infants hospital in Providence. It's intended for patients with postpartum depression. Dr. Diaz concluded that Lindsay had no postpartum depression and rejected a bipolar disorder diagnosis because no history of hypomania or psychosis or family history. So now you've got another place to point the finger, pointing at Dr. Diaz now. Get out of the hospital. There's nothing wrong with you. Dr. Diaz accepted their belief that the symptoms were due to over-medication and recommended weaning the Seroquel. Following the Seroquel reduction, suicidal ideation resurged. December 30th, Lindsay went to the emergency room and suggested admission to the McLean Hospital. December 31st, Lindsay admitted herself to McLean. They placed her in a locked unit with 15-minute suicide checks. This is December 31st. January 3rd, we're just a few weeks before the children are killed. The doctor advised Lindsay to stop the Seroquel and the benzodiazepines and prescribed trazodone for sleep. January 4th, Lindsay asked if she could go home for Cora's birthday because her thoughts had improved since the Seroquel decreased. She was approved for discharge. Lindsay returned to treatment with Dr. Tufts. Chronic major depressive disorder was the diagnosis. January 10th, Lindsay returned to Dr. Tufts and was switched to Valium for a benzodiazepine taper. Dr. Tufts indicated that at some point we will add an antidepressant. On the 16th, she was still experiencing depression. She had to force herself to do anything, and the hallucinations continued. You should harm the children. You should kill yourself. You will never be the same. The only option is to die. She felt like a zombie, and Dr. Tufts prescribed amitriptyline, another antidepressant. On January 23rd, during another 17-minute appointment, Lindsay reported being a little more anxious with her heart racing. Dr. Tufts reported that her mood is the same, is flat, is anxious, no motivation, numb, has to force herself out of the house. Dr. Tufts increased the medication, the amitriptyline, to 20 milligrams. That night, Lindsay did not sleep. It's a documented history. It's a devastating history if the jury believes it. I remember the first jury view in a case I covered in Massachusetts was Dr. Greinader, who was accused of bludgeoning his wife to death in the wooded area on this trail. And we in the jury, we all went to that trail and we saw where it all happened. And it just made the testimony so much more vivid in my mind as a reporter on that case. I can't imagine what it does for a jury who has to make a decision. It just, everything seems to make sense. And you'll recall in the Karen Reed case, also Massachusetts, the jury went to 34 Fairview. And it makes so much sense. And I know sometimes things can change a little bit at a scene, but still, it's so much better than just photographs or a map. Even if they try to do these fancy 3D imaging things, there's nothing like actually being at the scene to make the rest of the evidence make more sense and give a jury context. And in this case, we're going to have a jury view. Take a listen to the judge and the lawyers discussing the jury view.
In regards to the view, I know that I had allowed the Commonwealth's motion for review. There was a proposed order with the Commonwealth's motion. I don't think I got a proposed order from the homeowner, and I think he was invited to propose one, but I haven't seen anything. So, Commonwealth, what's your position in regards to it's your order? But what are your thoughts in regards to that?
Well, I was approaching it as most of these types of cases that I do. We usually let the homeowner know when we'll be there. They make sure they're out of the home and it's unlocked. We go in. A case like this where we have 18 jurors, maybe send them in groups of 4 or something along those lines to see whatever myself and defense counsel want them to take note of, and then leave the premises. With an instruction to the jurors, they're not to open any closets or anything like that or touch any personal items. And I think that's pretty much what's encompassed in the order, if I recall.
Yeah. Mr. Reddington?
I have no position on that, Your Honor. Your Honor knows that I indicated I don't think it's necessary to have the view plus videos plus photographs, but I understand you've already made your decision on that. So it's a house that is now occupied by a man and his partner. It does not look at all like it did before when Lindsay and her family was living there. So I defer to your discretion on any specifics on the view.
All right. So my intention would be to, as I said, allow the motion for the view, issue that order in line with the proposed order that was given by the Commonwealth, and then as we go forward, we can give the homeowner a notice on that. We'll have police and security there to address any of those concerns. in the order regards to the media, we'll also deal with the no photographing of the jury during the view.
Could I just make an observation, Your Honor?
Sure.
It's a situation where obviously we're dealing with people that are civilians or professionals, and this is not a situation where we're looking at a drive-by murder in the middle of an inner city where there's danger to jurors and stuff. Can I ask that the court at least limit the police presence? I mean, I have had it with police officers on motorcycles buzzing back and forth next to the jury bus, and police officers stopping traffic and blue lights behind you, blue lights in front of you. There's no need for that type of a police presence in this case. We're going to take a bus to a house in a residential area in Duxbury, and that's it. I understand that there may be a need to, close down a road or something, but I would ask that we don't have such an overwhelming police presence for obvious reasons.
Come on.
We could go to sidebar. We do have a plan in place, but for security purposes.
Sure, yeah. You see in sidebar?
Definite theme here with Kevin Reddington. Doesn't like police, doesn't trust them, right? Okay, let's show you the house because this is significant. We can take a look at this from Google Maps. We got an aerial view here. And what's significant here is that she's found in the backyard, not in the front yard. So in her attempt or faux attempt to take her own life by going through the window and either shimmying down the house or jumping, we know the results of that. But that was all in the back of the house, so he doesn't discover it. He comes home, goes through the front door. So he's not going to see her on the front yard, but she is going to be in the back area of this home. And you can see it's sort of remote where it is. Nice neighborhood, nice residential neighborhood. Obviously, the house is going to look a little different now than it did, but there you can see the second floor, the second story that she would have gone down. And there's going to be some evidence and disputed evidence about whether or not she actually jumped, whether she was really attempting to take her own life or not. That is not being conceded by prosecutors in this case at all. We've got some more images from Zillow like this from inside the home as well. Now, obviously, the home is not going to be the same as it was then. But I think what's important is the general layout because the children are found in the basement. She's upstairs. How easy or difficult would it be to either corner or round up the three children to commit this act? And what was happening inside the house, because there's going to be testimony about that. And they're going to hear that 911 call. So when you actually visit the house and you see it, you can understand what he found upstairs and then going down into the basement of the home as well. I think all of it just gives the jury an opportunity to better judge the rest of the evidence. So I think the jury view, great idea, and will be another important piece of this whole case for prosecutors. When you look at this photo of Lindsay and Patrick Clancy and their children, it is difficult to imagine the horror that would destroy this family, something that would take 3 young lives and leave a mother in a wheelchair for life.
She had to strangle the kids to unconsciousness and then keep strangling them for additional minutes.
Lindsay Clancy admits she did it. She took the lives of her 3 young children, but she also believes she should not be held criminally responsible.
It's the government's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was not acting as a result of a mental disease or defect.
And Lindsay's husband, Patrick, is standing by his ex-wife, the woman who took the lives of his 3 children. And Patrick will be perhaps the most important witness at the trial, as this jury must decide if Lindsay is a mass murderer or the victim of postpartum psychosis fueled by prescribed drugs, which made her kill those 3 little children. This is the biggest trial of the summer, and it's a case involving incredible heartbreak for those 3 children who were brutally killed by their own mother. But the question is, will this jury feel any sympathy for Lindsay Clancy, the defendant, who claims she's the victim of postpartum psychosis? Lindsay Clancy, Patrick Clancy, they are no longer married, all right? So now his ex-wife, they don't have that connection anymore, right? The children are gone, and now the marriage is over. So what was a family at one point is no longer a family. And I think it's an important factor in all of this. It will be because of Patrick, who is a victim in all of this case, but will also be the most important witness in the entire case. So the fact that he comes to this as someone who is no longer married to the defendant and his testimony purportedly will help the defendant, I think that adds to his level of credibility in front of this jury. But as a victim in the case, you know, the way he's looked at will be equally important by the jury. He's the man who lost 3 children. He's the one who did nothing wrong here and does not have his family anymore. And it's because of the woman at the defendant's table, his ex-wife, Lindsay Clancy. So the perception of Patrick and his credibility is crucial in all of this. Now, we know that the defense is the Massachusetts version of insanity, which is lack of criminal responsibility. And in Massachusetts, the way the law is written, it's a huge advantage for the defense. And I'm going to explain it all. But that advantage is so much greater than you would have in almost any other state in the nation in terms of burden of proof, how it's going to go down, and what prosecutors need to prove. So the insanity defense in Massachusetts, they don't call it insanity, but it's a lot easier for the defense to win. It's never easy for them to win, but it's a lot easier in the state of Massachusetts. And it ultimately comes down to what I look at as the ultimate question, because we bring in the jurors, right? And the question is, the jury will know that this woman took the lives of 3 innocent children who were absolutely defenseless and who loved their mother and relied upon their mother for everything. Yet she's the one who took their lives one at a time. Can they say not guilty when asked about that woman who they know did it? And that is the overwhelming challenge that defendants have when they claim insanity or lack of criminal responsibility. So even though there is a huge advantage in the law in Massachusetts for this defendant, that advantage does not get you over the top of the hill. No, it doesn't. It's going to come down to the facts. It's going to come down to the facts. And the question is, what does this jury believe about what this woman was doing at that moment? And I'm going to explain all the law to you as well, so you have a clear idea of what needs to be proven in this case in order for this jury to potentially utter those 2 words, not guilty, for a woman who admits taking these exercise bands and putting them around the throats of each of her children one at a time and squeezing it for as long as it takes for their lives to end. It was brutal. It was cruel. And that type of brutality or cruelty rarely results in a verdict where 12 people get together and all agree, not guilty. Not guilty. So we'll see. Okay, speaking of the jury and jury selection, it's taking place up at the courthouse. And that's where we are joined by Sierra Gillespie, host of Law and Crime's Scandal. Okay, Sierra, looks a little windy there in Plymouth County today. There's a bit of a storm brewing. Tell us, though, about what's happening, the atmosphere at the courthouse. This is a long-anticipated trial. Now we're in jury selection. How would you describe things up there right now?
Yeah, when I got to Plymouth this morning, Vinny, I was actually kind of surprised. I mean, the parking lot is full, but outside there's nothing. It doesn't look like there's this high profile court case happening here. It just looks like everybody's going about their business. But when you get inside and you head to the third floor of the courthouse, that's really where all of the action is. There's a bunch of reporters, a lot of local TV stations, and even some national like us that are buzzing around trying to ask questions. You know, when do you think openings are going to be? How many jurors do you think are going to be seated today? Asking a lot of questions, things of the like. And then inside of the courtroom, that's really where the intensity is. I mean, this is a big deal. Seating 18 people on a jury. There's really high stakes here, not to mention actually seeing Lindsay Clancy in the flesh. I mean, it does feel very somber and very, you know, heavy in the courtroom.
And let's talk about Lindsay Clancy, how she appears inside the courtroom. Does she sort of respond or react to things? What are we seeing from her?
Okay, this was what I was most interested to see. Lindsay Clancy herself. I mean, I have seen her in photos where it's the picture-perfect Clancy family, where they're smiling, they're well-dressed, they look like they have the white picket fence perfect life. But I haven't seen Lindsay Clancy in person since all of that until today. And let me tell you, she is somber. She has a straight face, almost stone-faced completely. Today she's wearing a nice outfit. You know, it looks pretty put together. It looks appropriate for court. She's wearing long sleeves and a long skirt, but of course she is in her wheelchair because she's paraplegic. And that kind of leads into the next thing here. The fact that she has two nurses who are right behind her in the very first row of the courthouse to tend to Lindsay whatever she may need. I mean, before court started today, it was kind of on a delay. They were in the back room tending to Lindsay, making sure, you know, she had whatever she needed. But as far as her reactions, pretty minimal. What I will say is in the past, I've kind of seen her with her hair, you know, kind of blocking her face, kind of sullen, sunken down. Today, her hair looked done. Somebody styled her hair, so she cares about her appearance. Behind her glasses, she's following. You know, when somebody's talking, she looks over to them, looks back to the other person who's talking. She's following along seemingly with what everyone's saying, but never a smile, never a smirk, never a frown. Pretty much stone cold face all throughout this selection today.
And when you talk about the nurses and that situation, to me, a big issue in this case is where do the sympathies lie? Like, there's obvious sympathies for the three victims. We get it. There's sympathy for Patrick, her ex-husband, you know. But at the end of the day, it seems the defense is wanting this jury to feel sympathy towards her. So just from an appearance perspective, does it lend itself to some level of sympathy? A woman in a wheelchair with nurses standing by as she's accused of the murder of her three children?
I mean, I would say so. I've been to how many trials at this point of working for Court TV and Law and Crime? I mean, I've never seen a defendant quite like this that has, you know, the nurses behind her, that's in a wheelchair. I mean, you literally can't hide the fact that she attempted to die by suicide after killing her children. You cannot hide it because she became paraplegic as a result of that. So I do think, to your point, Vinny, I mean, people probably may feel, it depends on their beliefs, obviously, or, you know, the evidence that's coming out in trial, but people would maybe feel bad for Lindsay Clancy in all of this because it is really emotional, and you do see a person who's in need of, you know, around-the-clock care.
So let's talk about the rest. And jury selection sometimes is a little different, the way things are configured in the courtroom, who can be in, who can be out, etc. But does she have supporters at the courthouse?
I haven't seen any fans, so to speak. You know, when we cover other trials, for instance, I was at the P. Diddy trial. That was so many supporters for P. Diddy there. I haven't seen any random or regular quote-unquote people. Sometimes we have trial watchers who are here to support a defendant, and online she does have a group of moms who are behind her, you know, saying this was postpartum psychosis, you know, it was the doctor's fault, etc., etc. So she does have people online, but here in real life, the only people who are there to support her are the second row, right behind the nurses. The second row are her two parents and her grandmother who are there, and I mean, I took account of them. I clocked them there, kind of paying attention to what they were saying. Actually, I walked right behind them. They held the door for me. Very polite, very nice, unassuming people. I heard them saying, you know, all right, let's just go out and stretch our legs. This is going to be kind of a long day. That's pretty much what they were talking about. So they're following along with everything, and she does have her family there, but nobody who's like a major true crime supporter that I've seen.
It's interesting, right? Because we're back up in Massachusetts, and I recall during the Karen Reed trial when you had, hundreds and hundreds of people outside the courthouse. A lot of people, in having discussions with them, many of them were talking about this Lindsay Clancy case. Like, Vinny, have you heard about the Lindsay Clancy case? Yes, I've heard about it. And so I was wondering if there was going to be some level of support from some of those folks, but it's not necessarily apparent yet.
Yeah.
Patrick Clancy, the ex-husband.
No,
He is obviously the big witness in this case, the man in the middle of everything. Is he up there yet?
I have been keeping my eyes peeled for Patrick Clancy because he's the person we all want to hear from, right? We want to know the status of his relationship with Lindsay, first and foremost. We want to know how he's coping or grappling with the loss of his 3 children, almost 3.5 years out from this terrible tragedy. Plus, of course, as you pointed out, he is the star witness in all of this. He's the person who found his children, called 911. He's going to have to go through these really terrible memories, number one. But number two, he's also voiced support for Lindsay. He's actually filed suit against the doctors in a civil lawsuit who had prescribed her that whole host of medications, the cocktail, as they called it. So it's kind of interesting, how Patrick falls in all of this. But have I seen him here today? Not yet. Not to say that he's not going to come. And
this jury now, motions before the trial about this, they're not going to be sequestered. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. This isn't a case. It's not different than most cases that we cover. In most cases we cover, juries are not sequestered. But it did come up, and it was talked about at the courthouse. In terms of the jury coming in and out of the courthouse and floating around, etc., what you're describing to me is that there really aren't people outside. There's none of those issues that we might see in other cases. So for this jury, it's going to be relatively normal, right? You instruct them beforehand, you instruct them afterwards. Don't talk to anyone, and they'll be coming and going as most juries do on Law and Crime and Court TV.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I was thinking Karen Reed for this case, too, because here in Massachusetts, I would be walking down the street in downtown Boston, and there's free Karen Reed left and right. And I went to the courthouse there, and let me tell you, it was shoulder to shoulder. People were in pink. And I thought, okay, there's a lot of following for this Lindsay Clancy case here. I thought maybe it'd be something kind of similar, but the courthouse is no one. There's no one here except for people who are supposed to be here and media today. So to your point, I do think it's going to be pretty normal. The same thing that any juror anywhere in America would have to do, go home, don't talk about it, don't research the case, things like that. But I have seen a couple of interesting things for prospective jurors so far, just about their emotions in all of this.
And what is that?
Okay, so I have seen multiple people who are crying, literally crying. And this is what's hard, is they put the white noise up so that we can't hear, but I'm in the front row, so I'm trying to hear as much as I can. And there was one woman who I would say she's about, 65. She was talking about being a mother and how she doesn't know if she is going to be able to be unbiased on the jury, impartial. She literally had Kleenex with her that she was dabbing her eyes. And I think it's just because people know this case. I mean, what they're about to sit on a jury for potentially is, it's going to be hard. It's going to be 6 to 8 weeks of some of the most gruesome testimony, evidence, all of the like. And yesterday there were a couple of mothers who said, I simply cannot be seated on this jury because I am a mother. I just can't do it. And that's what I saw today. So there is raw emotion that's in the courthouse too.
You bring up such a great point. And I've talked about this before, that the one potential juror in all of this is the mom factor, right? And every mother has their own experience. Some may have experienced some level of postpartum issues. Others may have had none. Some may have been able to very easily overcome them. Others may have been somewhat debilitated by it all. And that's what the case is ultimately about. So it seems most of the potential jurors who are mothers are going to require an extra level of scrutiny to understand their perspective. Both prosecutors and defense would want to know. And obviously, it's a very personal type of voir dire that we don't normally get.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that this case is really opening up the discussion of the postpartum psychosis of it all. I mean, if we wind back the clock, if you guys remember, you know, in the early aughts, Brooke Shields came forward talking about the baby blues. Tom Cruise kind of made fun of her. It was this whole ordeal, and that really brought open to light, you know, this postpartum depression. So since then, in the 20 or so years it's been since then, people are talking more about postpartum depression, saying, you know, it is a real thing. But postpartum psychosis takes it to another level. This is something that's so rare for, if, you know, for, I don't know the statistics, but postpartum depression way more common than the postpartum psychosis is what Lindsay Clancy's defense team is saying that she has. So, I mean, I think it's really going to be emotional. It's going to be scientific, but it really is going to pull on the heartstrings of mothers and fathers, you know, all the jurors. I would anticipate, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human, right? And to have to hear the way that these children died, I think it's going to be hard, whoever the jurors are.
Absolutely. But I believe personally that we should have some moms on this jury. Like the fact that your mother should not exclude you from participating in all this, because their perspective is incredibly valuable. You're allowed to bring your life experience into the jury box. You're allowed to talk about common sense and issues related to you. But at the end of the day, you have to be fair and impartial. So those jurors that were so emotionally overcome, I get it, how difficult it would be for them. Because some mothers would look at this like, I could never harm a child. There is nothing that would ever make me hurt my child. And there's others who may have experienced something to some level of what Lindsay Clancy is claiming to have experienced. Okay, before we run out of time, as we get ready for this trial, give us a little bit of the timetable here of when this thing is going to start, how long it's going to take, what does the road ahead look like?
Okay, so that's really a question mark. I mean, this week they just sat the 6th juror here, a man, just before I'm coming to do this interview with you, Vinny. So now we have 3 women, 3 men at the time of this recording. And I overheard the judge say to this juror, okay, you're on the jury. Thank you so much. Come back on Thursday. So that to me is signifying that they're hoping to have opening statements presented on Thursday. But at the same time, they want 18 jurors to be seated. So I'm not exactly sure how the math is working as we're moving into the afternoon hours at the time of this recording. So unclear if they're actually going to have everyone seated. I wouldn't be surprised if we have openings on Friday, maybe even on Monday if they haven't officially sat their jury. After that, the trial is supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks long. A lot of testimony, a lot of harrowing information that's going to have to come out. And that's another thing that a lot of jurors have kind of raised the flag for, saying, you know, I can't be away from work for 2 months. Some college students have said, I'm going back to school in mid-August. I can't be, you know, on a trial for 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it may be. So it's going to be a long road ahead before we have kind of the conclusion in this case. We're just right at the forefront.
All right. Great information, Sarah Gillespie. In the middle of it all at the courthouse in Plymouth County, Massachusetts. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny, for having me.
So some interesting reporting coming from one of the best journalists in the true crime world, from EastIdahoNews.com, Nate Eaton. Take a listen to this. This was posted on Facebook. And this was earlier in jury selection. 2 jurors have been seated in the Clancy trial. The judge wants 18 people on the jury, some alternates. Potential jurors have filled out questionnaires and are being called up one at a time for brief interviews, right? All that's kind of normal. Then Clancy's family members are in the courtroom. Patrick Clancy is expected to testify. Listen up, folks. Ready? You got your seatbelts on? He is now remarried and living in New York. Remarried and living in New York. And such an important figure in this entire case. His entire family, like, this is wiped out. His 3 children are gone. His wife goes out the window, ends up paralyzed in a wheelchair, charged with the murder of his children. And now he has apparently been able to make some separation and start to create a new life, although he's going to be part of this trial. So I want to bring in Nate Eaton from EastIdahoNews.com, who is joining us right now. Nate, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Vinny. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. This case is so heartbreaking on so many different levels, but looking at it through the eyes of Patrick Clancy, the husband, what a unique position he is in. And let's start though with the reporting on being remarried. Sometimes it's difficult for someone to be able to turn the page in their life after going through a tragedy like this. What have you found out?
Well, he's been quite private about his personal life. We do know he spoke with the New Yorker. They did a lengthy profile about a year or so ago, a little over a year ago. And he did say that he had moved to an apartment in New York and was moving on with his life. And I've learned through a source that he has since remarried. The length, I'm not sure, working to figure that out. But the interesting thing to me, Vinny, is that despite that, despite moving on, moving to a new state, starting a new relationship, he is still standing by Lindsay Clancy to the point that he's involved in these civil lawsuits, which you've talked about before, but also the fact that he's going back and he's one of the main witnesses on her behalf. And he has said, I did not marry a monster. I married a woman who has medical problems, who has mental illness problems. So it will be interesting to see how much during his testimony he talks about his current personal life. When people are called to the stand, the prosecutor will generally ask, or the defense attorney will ask, and where do you live today? And you have since remarried. I mean, they generally get into the personal aspect to lay some foundation to prove that, yes, I've moved on with my life, but also I think as a juror, you might find that more impactful that, wow, he left his marriage with Lindsay, got remarried, but yet is still standing by her, the mother of his children, and has come back to testify on her behalf.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in the jury box, right, and this is not an easy case for either side, right? There are great arguments for the defense, and obviously you have vulnerable victims, you have the planning of this, or the alleged planning of this killing, this mass killing of 3 children. But if I'm a juror, I'm looking at Patrick Clancy. Like, how does he see this? It seems like his perspective and his viewpoint is valuable. And it's almost as if he's giving the jury, hey, you can find her not guilty if you want. Like, it's like giving them permission in a sense. You know what I mean?
And he's asked the public to forgive her. He's in his the GoFundMe page that was set up for him. He wrote a very long, beautiful post about his children and his wife, and says, I've forgiven her, you should too. You think about it, had he decided to testify on behalf of the prosecution, that could have swayed it the other way. Had he come forward and said, yeah, she was at fault. She sent me out to go get the dinner at a place we normally didn't go to, and I was gone for 1 hour, and this was pre-planned. But instead, he's not doing that. The only person I think that might be the more powerful witness is if she takes the stand. But even then, obviously, you have some doubt because she's the defendant. She's the one that did these horrible crimes, something she does not, contest, but something that she says she shouldn't be held criminally liable for. What's interesting, Vinny, to me too, on Facebook and on social media, anytime I post about this story, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments, and it's pretty much split. A lot of times in these cases, the vast majority of the public sides against the defendant. But man, this is one that you see people taking her side, and there are people who aren't taking her side. And obviously when the trial unfolds, we'll see all the evidence and we'll have a clearer picture. But is that how the jury's going to be, where it's half and half? I mean, these deliberations will be fascinating to see how long they go.
This is such a difficult one because in many of the cases that we've covered through the years, when you talk about an insanity type defense, right? There's no history. There's no history. And that history here is so intense and so recent in time to when the killing of the 3 children take place. And from my perspective, that's the difference in this case. That's a huge difference in this case is the facts of the case play into it as well as the law in Massachusetts. So, I mean, this is very unpredictable, but if the public is split, and we've seen like the way the public sees cases online has been pretty consistent with what juries have been doing recently, from Johnny Depp to Karen Reed in Massachusetts. Like we're seeing and reading the public online, and then we're seeing the jury respond the same way.
Yeah, the other thing too, Vinny, is the defense plans to call a whole bunch of Lindsay Clancy's coworkers who worked with her at the hospital. These are people who saw her day in, day out, worked with her, are able to testify about any changes they may have seen in her mental health from the time she was working to the time that she had the final baby, even changes in her mental health prior when she had her previous kids. That's going to be memorable for these jurors. I mean, this is a defense team who plans to put up a vigorous defense. They've said all along that they're not going to contest it. And if you're not contesting the actual crime, that, yeah, okay, she did it. Get that out of the way. Get that off the table so the jurors can relate to that. But then you need to get into the fact as what the insanity is and what the criminal liability is, which culpability, which they say she didn't do. She shouldn't be held responsible for that.
Yeah, I would not want to be on the jury in this case. It is, you've got these victims so vulnerable. You've got allegations that she's planning up the whole scheme where she's sending Patrick out to pick up some food. She's timing out how long it takes. There's the phone call that he makes to her, and there's no indication that anything is going on, almost like she's cool as a cucumber in taking the lives of the 3 children. Prosecutors are, I think, even going to take a look at what she did to herself and say, well, did she really try to take her own life? And to me, prosecutors are coming at this very aggressively as well.
They are 182, I think, potential witnesses. I mean, 6 or 7 pages of people they plan to call, multiple police agencies, multiple people from different hospitals and medical facilities, experts, DNA forensics, all of that. And then, those are the witnesses that bring important facts and evidence. A lot of times the memorable witnesses are the personal witnesses, the ones that we can relate to as husbands, wives, dads, moms, humans. So do they go through all of those witnesses and then the defense starts and maybe their first witness is Patrick Clancy? Do they start with him and he's on the stand for hours sharing his story? I mean, that could immediately change how the jury looks at things.
Absolutely. Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com, continuing the incredible reporting. Great to catch up with you, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you through the next couple of months of this trial.
Thanks for having me, Vinny. Good seeing you.
As Nate Eaton mentioned, that GoFundMe post, Patrick Clancy, over $1 million were raised, and what was written here, so important, so significant. I just want to read it to you. I just want to read you the words of Patrick Clancy. And this was, again, posted on GoFundMe on January 28th. This was posted just 4 days after the 3 children were strangled and just 1 day after the last child died. Thank you all for your love and support. The warmth I've received from the community is palpable, and your generosity gives me hope that I can focus on some sort of healing. I've seen all your messages and contributions, including some from people I haven't seen in over a decade, and many I've never met. I see and appreciate every one of you. A lot of people have said they can't imagine, and they're right. There's absolutely nothing that can prepare you. The shock and pain is excruciating and relentless. I'm constantly reminded of them, and with little sleep I dream about them on repeat. Any parent knows it's impossible to understand how much you will love your kids until you have them. The same goes for understanding the devastation of losing them. Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin were the essence of my life, and I'm completely lost without them. My family was the best thing that ever happened to me. I took so much pride in being Lindsay's husband and a dad to Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin. I always reminded myself that each day with them was a new gift. Kaylin usually woke up first and would rest his head on my shoulder for a few minutes as he adjusted to morning. Dawson typically sang or spoke his thoughts out loud for a while before we'd get to him. Cora was a big girl and would simply walk downstairs. I can still vividly picture her coming into the living room each morning with her hair in a mess, smile on her face. We always started our days together, reading books, cuddling up on the couch, and playing with magnet tiles. I loved taking them places, whether it was scooting at Chandler Elementary, vacation, skiing, out on the boat, or to Duxbury Beach, one of our favorite places on earth. They gave me purpose, and I never took it for granted. There's now a massive void where that purpose once was. Cora had an infectious laugh and was stunningly beautiful. She was the cautious one, but it really was because she was so caring. She used to say she wanted to be a doctor and a mama when she grew up, and she would practice by giving Kaylin checkups. If she was leaving the house to go somewhere, she would pick someone to take care of Caroline and Charlotte, her baby dolls. She had all the doll accessories available, so her sitters were well equipped. Before she turned 2, she was already wrapping them in perfect swaddles. We would tell her she's such a good little mama. She loved all babies, both real and pretend. She loved sloths, unicorns, tea parties, going to lunch with Nana and Grandpa, and giving presents to people. She knew everything about princesses, her favorite being Sophia the First. She truly loved her brothers and us and said it often in her sweet voice. We did a lot of father-daughter activities together, like skiing and visiting San Francisco, or just talking. I loved her, my firstborn, so much. Dawson had beautiful, bold brown eyes that beamed with friendship. He was naturally humorous and generous beyond the norm of a typical toddler, always willing to share his toys with others. For all the love he received, he always gave back more. His best quality was his pure kindness. He loved trucks, tractors, dinosaurs, Paw Patrol, worker guys, and being outside. He was adventurous and mischievous and enjoyed causing trouble, which he typically found hilarious. He was also remarkably smart. We always said if we didn't save enough for retirement, it'll be okay. We'll just live in Dawson's guest house. He would hug me tighter than most adults, and every night he told me in consistent words at bedtime, without fail, "Good night, Dada. I love you." We had a special bond from day one. He was my buddy, my first boy, and truly a gift. Kaylin was our easygoing child. I always said it was because he was the third child. He had to adapt, and he did easily. He was born with hardly any fuss and was by far our best sleeper. He was just an incredibly happy and vibrant baby, constantly smiling. Our nickname for him was Happy Callan. He was sitting on his own, and you could tell he was enjoying his growing independence as he would grab any object within reach. Sometimes he joined my Microsoft calls in the background, playing in his Jumpy. I would keep my camera on, too proud to leave it off. He started saying Dada whenever I walked into the room. The last moment we had together was our routine. I would come up from my office at the end of the day and swing him between my legs while he laughed and smiled. If I was ever having a bad day, Kaylin always knew how to heal me. Perhaps that's why he held on a little longer, to spare me whatever pain he could. As excruciating as it was, I was fortunate and grateful to feel his warmth until his very last moment. Faith is my only hope of believing he felt mine. Kaylin died with enormous courage despite being so little. Maybe it was his way of demonstrating what I need to do to press forward. I'll always try to draw inspiration from him. He'll always be my little hero. I want to share some thoughts about Lindsay. She's recently been portrayed largely by people who have never met her and never knew who the real Lindsay was. Our marriage was wonderful and diametrically grew stronger as her condition rapidly worsened. I took as much pride in being her husband as I did in being a father and felt persistently lucky to have her in my life. I still remember the very moment I first laid eyes on her and can recall how overcome I was with the kind of love at first sight you only see in the movies. It really didn't take long before I was certain I wanted to marry her. We said I love you to each other multiple times daily, as if it were a reflex. We habitually started every morning with a passionate hug, yielding a sigh of relief like we had each received the perfect medicine. If too much time passed without a hug, she'd look at me and ask, "Did you forget?" We mutually understood the reality that people can have bad days, but we stuck to the rule that when one of us gets lost, the other was always there to bring them home, always. She loved being a nurse, but nothing matched her intense love for our kids and dedication to being a mother. It was all she ever wanted. Her passion taught me how to be a better father. I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. I promise I'll put all my energy into healing and rediscovering my purpose. I owe that to all of you. Duxbury Fire and Police, our compassionate healthcare workers, our local faith leaders, the Microsoft community, and especially Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin. I don't know how or when I'll be able to do it, but your love and generosity will help me get started. I know that love always wins. Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin, you gave me so much in your short time here. I don't know if the pain will ever go away, but I'll do my best to carry on in your honor. Dada loves you so much and will always remember you. With love and endless gratitude.
Your Honor, when you give the instructions to the jury on the law after we've picked the jury, and I believe you do it before openings, in light of the fact that it's obvious that lack of criminal responsibility is the defense, is the central bedrock of the defense in the case, I would ask that the court would, in addition to instructing the jury, as you do in a generic sense, about proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that the court would also instruct the jury that as it relates to the burden of proof, in the unusual situation where you're dealing with lack of criminal responsibility, that it is not the defendant's burden to prove that she was lacking criminal responsibility, but in fact, upon presentation of evidence, it's the government's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was not acting as a result of a mental disease or defect. So I'm just asking that you would add that to the generic instructions.
Come on.
All right, big headline here. There is a huge advantage that the defense has in a case like this in the state of Massachusetts. And there are two reasons. One, you just saw there from Kevin Reddington talking about burden of proof. But let me go through the law with you so you understand, as this trial takes place over the course of a couple months, ultimately what this jury has to base their decision on. And we're talking about the legal standard for lack of criminal responsibility. Here it is, folks. A person is not responsible for criminal conduct. Again, this is in Massachusetts. If at the time of the crime, as a result of a mental disease or defect, they lacked the substantial capacity to do either of the following. 1, appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of their conduct. The defendant must have been deprived of a meaningful understanding of the legal or moral wrongfulness of their actions. This we see in almost every state. The defendant didn't know right from wrong. They didn't know what they were doing was wrong. Therefore, they can't be held criminally responsible. That's the same everywhere. The second part is the part that makes it much easier for a defendant in Massachusetts. They were unable to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. Even if the defendant knew their actions were wrong, their mental disease or defect rendered them substantially unable to control their behavior and follow the law. The defendant only needs to satisfy one or the other. So if Lindsay Clancy knew what she was doing was wrong, but still, because of her mental disease or defect, could not control her impulses to do it, the jury must find her not guilty. Think about that for a second. Think about it. It's so different than most states. Most states, do you know right from wrong? They cover it up. They flee. They try to hide it. They plan it carefully. none of that really applies in Massachusetts if they cannot control their actions because of their mental condition. Now, this is the other part that makes it easier for defendants in Massachusetts, the burden of proof. Now, in the federal system and many other states, the burden is on the defendant to prove that they were insane or lacked criminal responsibility. In Massachusetts, the burden rests entirely on the prosecution. The defense first has to present some credible evidence like psychiatric expert testimony, medical records that creates a reasonable doubt regarding the mental state of the defendant. They'll be able to do that in this case. That's not a problem. Then it will be the Commonwealth's burden, the prosecution's burden. Once that defense is raised, which it will be, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was criminally responsible. To do this, the prosecutor must prove either the defendant did not suffer from a mental disease or defect, or despite the mental illness, they retained the substantial capacity to appreciate their actions and conform to the law. But they've got to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the huge difference here. Like, reasonable doubt is this little piece up here, right? They've got to go beyond that. They've got to go beyond that to prove this. The burden is on the prosecution. And there's two different ways to prove lack of criminal responsibility in Massachusetts. This is not the way it is in the other states that we cover here on Court TV. So this trial, huge advantage for Lindsay Clancy and the defense. Doesn't mean they're going to win. It just means they have a much better chance in Massachusetts than they would in almost every other state in the nation. Now, if in fact she's found not guilty by lack of criminal responsibility, what happens? Here are the consequences. This is what takes place. Immediately, the judge will order the defendant to be secured in a mental health facility for observation up to about 60 days. Then the DA or the facility can then file for a civil commitment to try to keep them committed and locked up in a facility. However, the timeline of that is indefinite. The commitments are usually for 6 months, and then they're reviewed every year by the judge. And the legal test is, are they a danger to themselves or to others? So if at some point, if she's found not guilty, right, and then at some point is no longer considered a danger to herself or others, Lindsay Clancy could be set free. From the outside, Lindsay and Patrick Clancy seem to be living a wonderful life. A young couple with 3 young children living in a quiet, safe community in Duxbury, Massachusetts. It was the kind of life that many people dream of. But on January 24th, 2023, that dream life turned into a complete nightmare when the Clancy's 3 children were all brutally killed by their own mother.
And then she proceeds to wrap exercise bands around each child's neck and pull until they are dead.
Now, Lindsay is on trial, charged with 3 counts of murder and facing life in prison. But even though she admittedly did it, she does not believe she should be held criminally responsible.
To his and her ever dying regret, told Patrick in the presence of her mother that she was having psychosis, thoughts of hurting the children.
Today, day 1 of the trial that has divided the community. It's an emotionally charged case with young, innocent victims, but a killer mom with a documented history of mental illness and a father and ex-husband in the middle of it all. It is the biggest trial of the summer. A killer mom with mental illness, 3 young, innocent victims with a dad who is supporting his ex-wife. Will the jury side with Patrick Clancy and find Lindsay not responsible for the murder of her children? Through the years, we've covered many cases involving moms and their children, moms who have taken the lives of their children. Susan Smith was one killer mom. This is probably one of the most notorious, goes back to 1994, straps her children into the back of a vehicle, lets it roll into the lake, and then she claims someone else did it, points the finger at a fictitious African-American man. Well, she was convicted. She became public enemy number 1, evil, doing it so she could get rid of her kids and get on with her new boyfriend, right? That was that case. We had the case of Lori Daybell, another killer mom. Different kind of case to a certain extent, but not really. Yeah, there's all the doomsday cult stuff, but she also got rid of her kids to be with another man, the prophet Chad Daybell, and the money that she thought she was going to get from the life insurance. Now, one of the other big cases that we covered, and it was a very divisive case across the country, Andrea Yates, who systematically drowned her children. 2 trials. Second trial was found not guilty by reason of insanity. This is a case of a mom who claimed postpartum psychosis. This is the case that is the closest to the one that we're dealing with here because of the nature of what is alleged and what happened. Like Andrea Yates didn't go on to live some sort of a life afterwards. Lori Daybell did. Susan Smith did. But Andrea Yates didn't, and Lindsay Clancy obviously did not. Lindsay Clancy, another killer mom in all this. But the question is she a murderer? The trial's not about whether or not she did it. The trial's about whether or not she's a murderer, whether she should be held criminally responsible for what happened to her children. She too claiming the postpartum psychosis, a combination of the drugs and the treating physicians and nurses, and it was all everyone else's fault, not her fault. That's what she's claiming. So from my perspective, perhaps the most important witness in all of this is not going to be a doctor. It's not going to be an expert. It's not going to be an argument by an attorney. It's going to be the dad, Patrick Clancy. Patrick Clancy, who is in this case a victim. His 3 children are gone. His ex-wife did it. Now his ex-wife. He's remarried. But even at the time that this happened, he didn't believe that she should be held criminally responsible from the beginning, and still believes that. And that's why his testimony is so critical. For all the facts, right? He can testify about all the facts happening in that home at that time. But it's also how he testifies. What is the attitude? How are the answers crafted? Does the jury understand the vibe he is sending off? And if he does, and if they receive that, this jury could be getting permission from the father of the 3 victims to find the defendant, his ex-wife, not guilty. So as we watch his testimony, his crucial testimony, don't just listen to what he's saying. Pay attention to how he is saying it. Is he sending a signal to this jury that he doesn't like this prosecutor and he doesn't believe in this prosecution? Let's take a look now at the testimony of Patrick Clancy, the first witness called in the case by prosecutors.
When you returned to work, and you said that was in August, correct?
Yes.
What was the defendant's demeanor when you returned to work?
Increased anxiety and definitely, stressed out.
Do you recall describing her as slightly stressed but in good spirits?
Yeah.
And when she was stressed out, when she was showing some anxiety, how did that manifest?
I don't really know how to describe it. I guess it's just any way you can tell that somebody's stressed out. And I don't know, she would say, I'm not looking forward to going back to work. I remember once she said it's just so unnatural to be separated from your newborn, stuff like that.
So she didn't want to go back to work? Is that what you're saying?
I think she did. It was just a really difficult transition for her.
Yeah. And do you recall attending a wedding on September 17th, 2022?
Yeah.
And where was that wedding?
New Hampshire.
Was it just you and Lindsay that went, or did the whole family go?
We brought Kellen.
And when you were at that wedding, do you recall having a conversation with Lindsay about medication?
Yes.
What did she say to you?
We were walking downtown, and she said, I think I'm going to start taking Zoloft.
And did she tell you why she wanted to start taking Zoloft?
She said, I think it's really going to help with my anxiety and with going back to work.
And did she tell you how she was going to go about getting Zoloft?
Yeah, I asked her, how are you going to get Zoloft? It's a prescription. And she said, usually just ask the doctor and they'll give it to you.
And did she tell you that she was going to see a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I believe so.
And when she did that, did she tell you who she was going to see?
No.
Okay. Did you eventually learn the name of the person who she went to see?
Months later, yeah.
Okay. And who was that?
Jennifer Tufts.
Okay. And did Lindsay tell you when she started seeing Dr. Jennifer Tufts?
No.
Did you learn, or strike that, did Lindsay tell you when she received the medication and when she started it?
No. I should correct that. It's not exactly.
Well, let me just ask a question first.
Sure.
Did you have a conversation with Lindsay about the medication she was on?
Eventually, yeah, but I didn't know the start date.
Okay. And so when did this conversation take place, this eventual conversation?
Probably the end of October.
Okay. And at that point, what did Lindsay tell you about the medication and how she was taking it?
I don't remember exactly, but I learned that she was taking the Zoloft, and I don't remember really too much about it after that. She was just taking it, and we were seeing how it went.
And did you notice any changes in her physically during that time frame that she was on it and you weren't aware she was on it?
At the time, no, I don't think I did.
Okay. And did you notice any changes in her emotionally during that time when she was on it, but you weren't aware she was on it?
Yeah, she wasn't really improving. She just kind of seemed to be gradually becoming more in like a depressed state.
And how was that manifesting? What were you noticing?
It was just small things. I was planning a trip with Cora to San Francisco, and she was nervous about us going. And I remember we went to a Halloween event, and just leading up to it, I remember it just kind of seemed like she didn't want to go for some reason.
Okay. Now, do you recall learning that she had actually obtained the prescription the day before she told you she was going to ask for the prescription?
I did later learn that, yeah.
Okay. So she's telling you at the wedding that she is going to ask to take this medication and going to see a psychiatrist to get on that medication, but she actually already had the prescription. Is that correct?
Correct. I don't think she started taking it yet, but she already had it.
Okay.
Hold it right there for 1 second. I think this is an important point, and it's going to be a theme for prosecutors throughout, that Lindsay Clancy is not honest. She lies. She manipulates. She deceives. Okay? And this is really the groundwork, the framework, the foundation for that. When she starts that first prescription, oh yeah, thinking about getting Zoloft, she's already on it, or she already had seen the doctor. So she's lying to her own husband about the timing of all of this. Let's watch some more.
And did Lindsay tell you how long she took the medication for?
She may have. I don't remember the exact time frame. I just remember she took it for a period of time, and then her sleep started to suffer, so she stopped taking it.
And did she tell you whether or not she spoke to her provider, her doctor, about the troubles she was having?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And did Lindsay tell you that she was advised to double the dose of the Zoloft?
She may have. I don't remember.
Page 31. You could look at lines 20 to 22, and then just look up when you're
Sure.
finished.
Okay, yeah, apparently she did.
Did that refresh your memory?
Yeah.
And so did Lindsay tell you that she was supposed to double the dose?
I guess she did, yeah.
Did you notice any changes in her sleep during that time when she was on the medication but you weren't aware she was on it?
Eventually, yeah.
When was that?
I don't remember the exact dates. But she just, one night she said, do you mind? She started by saying, I'm not mad or anything, but do you mind sleeping in the basement? And letting me just sleep in our room with Callan. And then you can take the monitors down in the basement, and if Cora and Dawson get up, you can get up with them. She said, I've just been having a lot of trouble sleeping, and I'm hoping that, like, if there's less in and out, then there'll be less disruption.
Okay. Had you noticed prior to her telling you this that she was up a lot or having trouble sleeping, like physically seeing her awake?
No, not that I recall.
And did you in fact start sleeping in the basement for a period of time?
I think I did it for like 2 nights, and then she actually went down in the basement.
Okay, so then you went back up to your bedroom to sleep, is that correct?
Yeah.
And how long did Lindsay sleep in the basement for after that?
Maybe a couple weeks.
And so during that time frame, was she telling you that she was still having trouble sleeping?
Yes.
But you weren't actually down there watching her sleep. You're getting this information from her, correct?
Correct.
Were you aware that out of the Zoloft prescription she was given, she only took 7 pills?
No.
After you had the conversation with Lindsay where she said she was going to double the dose of Zoloft, did you notice any difference in her demeanor or behavior?
I would say yes. I don't know if I connected it with the doubling of her Zoloft, but over that period of time, she just kept getting worse and worse.
And what period of time was that? What month are we in?
Mid-October to the end of December.
Okay. So she got the prescription in September, started taking it in October, took 7 pills, but was having difficulty in December. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
From this medication?
Yep. Well, I don't know which medication it was from, but yeah.
Okay. At some point in time, did Lindsay switch providers?
Yes.
And why did she do that?
Because whatever she was doing with Jennifer Tufts, it wasn't working. She was only getting worse. And she thought that it would be better if she worked with, I guess, more of like a perinatal psychiatrist.
And did she get a referral or a recommendation of where to go?
I think so, yeah.
Do you know who gave her that recommendation?
It might have been my mother.
And your mother's a nurse at South Shore Hospital, correct?
Yeah.
Does she also do labor and delivery work?
Yes.
Okay. And so do you know which provider or which office she recommended?
Yeah, her name is Julie Paul.
And was she at the South Shore Perinatal Clinic?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And do you know when that was?
I don't know the dates on that.
Do you recall saying previously that it was towards the end of November?
Yeah, that sounds accurate, yeah.
Okay. And you said she initially saw someone named Julie Paul, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do you know how long she saw Julie Paul at that facility?
I think it was only 4 or 5 days.
And were you aware that Julie Paul left that office?
Yes.
And do you know who Lindsay saw after Julie Paul?
Rebecca Gelata.
And was Rebecca Gelata a nurse practitioner?
Yes.
Were you aware that she also saw a licensed social worker therapist named Letitia Dukes while she was at the South Shore perinatal clinic?
I don't recall Letitia Dukes, but it's possible.
So Lindsay never told you that she had therapy sessions with a person named Letitia Dukes during that time frame?
I don't remember any therapy sessions now.
Okay. After switching to Julie Paul and then Rebecca Gelada, did Lindsay start coming home with different prescription bottles?
Yes.
Okay. And were some of these medications that she came home with, were some of them during the time she was with Dr. Tufts?
I think some of them were, yeah.
And some of them were while she was with Julie Paul, is that correct?
Correct.
And then some while she was with nurse practitioner Gelada, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there were a lot of pills prescribed, but not a lot of pills taken, correct?
Is that comprehensive of all the pills that were prescribed?
These are the pills that you brought into the police station. So out of these?
Out of those, yeah. It's possible that not a lot were taken.
Hold it there for 1 second. This is a pretty significant point, I think, for prosecutors. Because a big part of the defense is she's prescribed all these medications. But is she actually taking the medications that she's prescribed? And the prosecutor seems to be indicating here, she only took 7 of these. She took a few of these. She took a couple of those. She's not taking the pills that she's prescribed. And the reason the prosecution is doing this, I think, is to head off the defense that you blame the medicine. You blame Big Pharma. She's over-medicated. These things don't work. These things make things worse for her. But it looks like the prosecutor's trying to say, well, she's not really even taking these medications. Let's watch some more.
Do you recall what was the most amount of pills prescribed? I guess I could ask this better. What was the maximum number of medications she was on at any one time?
I want to say 3 or 4.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that she, at any given time, the most she was prescribed was 3, but most of the time it was 2 medications that she was prescribed at any given time?
It wouldn't be terribly surprising, no.
Now, on November 16th, 2022, did Lindsay visit South Shore Hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And why did she go to the South Shore Hospital that day?
I believe that day it was because she basically went 48 hours without sleeping.
And was she having heart palpitations?
I think so, yeah.
Were you aware that she had taken a weed gummy that day?
I don't recall.
And are you aware that she didn't tell medical staff at the hospital when describing her symptoms and her medication that she left out that she had used marijuana?
I wasn't with her, so I don't know what she talked about at the hospital.
Prosecutors are going after her, right? They charge her with murder here. Prosecutors believe that she's a mass murderer, Lindsay Clancy. They're going full force at her. So what I want to do right now, and I think it's always important to understand the prosecution theory, right? That's why we have opening statements in the beginning. It gives the jury an idea of what to expect and what the roadmap is and what the theory is, especially for prosecutors, And in a case like this, you're going to have to sell this to the jury, that this is a woman who wanted her children dead, wanted them gone, not because of the mental illness, because she wanted them gone. So let's take you into the courtroom for the opening statement of the prosecution.
The defendant knows that Patrick has to stop at CVS, go to 3V. She knows that it's about 5 miles from their house to get to the restaurant. She knows approximately how much time she has for him to go there and come back. She then takes the children down into the basement. She separates Dawson from Cora and Callan, and then she proceeds to wrap exercise bands around each child's neck and pull until they are dead. She leaves the bands wrapped around each child's neck and goes back upstairs. In the kitchen, she gets a knife, and then she proceeds to the second floor of the home. In the middle of this, she misses a call from Patrick. He's at CVS. She misses the call. She calls him right back, and they talk for 14 seconds. Nothing that she does or says in that phone call is of concern to Patrick. He proceeds on his task, and she proceeds with hers. She goes to the second floor master bedroom, locks the door, crushes up some pills, and attempts to take her own life. She uses the knife she got in the kitchen to slash her wrists and her neck. She moves the bed away from the wall, away from the window. She opens that window and goes out. She lands on the cold, hard ground. We expect during the course of this trial that you'll hear the defendant made claims that either right after Patrick left the house or after he called her from the CVS, depending on which version of the events she's telling, she heard a voice, a male voice, a voice that she had never heard before, a voice that she never heard again. And that voice told her that it was her last chance, that she had to kill the kids so that she could kill herself. She immediately took action when she heard the voice, with no direction or details from this so-called voice, and she killed the children. Once she killed the children, the voice stopped. When you consider this information in the course of the trial, ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you consider the source, the timing, the substance of her statements about this voice. You're also going to hear from, or you may hear from, forensic psychologists and psychiatrists who talk about what's called command hallucinations and voices that people hear before they do something. And when you hear that testimony, I ask that you keep in mind the details of what she's saying the voice told her, and the details of when this voice spoke to her. Another important thing to remember throughout the course of this trial is that this is not a case about the Lindsay Clancy that sits before you today. This case is about the Lindsay Clancy on January 24th, 2023, at the time of the crimes. This was not a woman in the throes of psychosis on January 24th, 2023. This was a woman who acted intentionally, rationally, and swiftly to accomplish a very specific goal: to kill. You'll see and hear evidence about all the things that she did that day, what she did in the days leading up to this incident, leading to the murders. You'll hear her spending time with her family and friends. You'll hear her appearing to be in good spirits and doing better for all intents and purposes. On that very day, you'll hear she interacted with people at the doctor's office. She came home and took care of the kids. She talked to people on the phone and via text message. The evidence will show you she was not psychotic that day. Throughout the evidence in this trial, you will learn about the defendant being the classic overachiever in school, in her personal life, in her nursing career. She was someone who liked to control every little detail of her life, of her family's life. In contrast to pictures you'll see of the doting mother, the dedicated nurse, you'll also see a side of Lindsay Clancy that's different. Somebody extremely controlling, meticulous, and manipulative. The days were laid out with specificity. Strict schedules were expected to be maintained. Food was planned carefully. Sleep was scheduled to the minute. And in the time after Callan was born, her last baby, the family had to adjust. And by all sources that I expect you're going to hear at that trial, that summer was great. But after Patrick had finished his paternity leave and was back to work full-time, when she no longer had a nanny to watch the baby, do laundry, tidy up the house, follow her schedule, when she was responsible for it all, it was hard. It was hard for her to maintain that control. It was hard for her to bond with her kids. And in efforts to maintain control, she withheld information from her husband, from her doctors. She reported serious symptoms that were inconsistent with her daily activities, you'll hear. And ultimately, on January 24th, 2023, the defendant made a calculated decision. This was a woman who no longer liked the life she thought she wanted. It was getting harder and harder to control. And when she saw the opportunity to escape, she made the selfish choice to take it, and to take Cora, Dawson, and Callan first before attempting to take her own life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a public debate about women's mental health and how the medical system treats women. This case is about this defendant, Lindsay Clancy. There is no dispute that she was dealing with mental health issues during this time period prior to the murders. There'll be medical records, medical doctors, mental health professionals that will talk about treatment, prescriptions, hospital visits. All that's going to be before you. The evidence will show that this defendant had a means and access to mental health that most people don't. And she chose to deal with her mental health issues in the worst way. She chose to manipulate her providers, seek out the quick and easy fix when she was feeling depressed and anxious. And when she didn't get what she expected, she chose an alternate route. She sought a different doctor. She changed medications after days. She disengaged from treatment when she didn't like the plan. After only 4 months in treatment, she made a choice, a deliberate and intentional decision that she did not want to try anymore. And because no one could take care of her kids the way she wanted them to, she had to take them with her. Despite all the precision that she exhibited that day, you'll hear, the timing of it all, the swiftness of the killings, overcoming the interruption of Patrick's phone call, what she did not anticipate was that she would not be able to complete the act by killing herself.
Wow. Powerful. Making the distinction between mental illness and legal criminal responsibility. I've been saying this for quite a while now. Lindsay Clancy's attorney, legendary up in Massachusetts, but would be great wherever he would try a case, but he practices in Massachusetts. He's what I call unfiltered defense, meaning he knows how to communicate, he knows how to say what's on his mind, and he just tells it like it is from his perspective, and the perspective of his client. This opening statement, absolute fire. Absolute fire. Let's get you inside the courtroom.
After the second child, she had postpartum. You're going to hear evidence that that's one of the issues that is important because that could lead to bipolar. One of the things that you don't do, which is taboo, is if you have somebody that's bipolar, you don't put them on an antidepressant, you don't put them on Zoloft, you don't put them on what's called an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It messes with your brain. You don't do that, but it was done in this case. The reason that Lindsay went to the doctors was in September 2022. July and August of 2022, they were very happy. Lovely little family. September, things went sideways. And she looked for, and you heard the government saying, and remember what they say in their opening, and remember that when they prepare a case, and remember how they can point at different aspects of a case to show guilt, that show that somebody's conniving. In this case, how many times we heard she faked the suicide. Faked the suicide. Little cuts, dinky little cuts, scratches you'll hear stated in the opening statement or time of the arraignment. That she asked for a lawyer. That's rich. You're going to hear evidence that she was in her bedroom after the horrific act in the basement, and that she was up in the bedroom, that she stood in front of a full-length mirror, that she took the knife that was in the kitchen that she had taken, and when she took the knife, she cut her throat in front of the mirror. This is no fake suicide. This is her when she was brought to the hospital. When she was in the hospital. That's what her appearance was at the South Shore Hospital.
Hold it right there.
When she's at the South Shore.
I told you, unfiltered. Tell it like it is. Aggressive. The way he is speaking inside that courtroom, it's as if he's prosecuting the prosecutor. And notice he refers to the prosecution as the government. There's a little bit of a negative connotation when we say the word government, right? There just is. It's also what they call the prosecution in federal court, and he spends a lot of time there. But it's everything he does is on purpose. Putting these images in front of the jury on an issue he knows that is a strong issue for him, which is whether or not she attempted to take her life. Prosecutors saying, no, she didn't. Now here's what he says the evidence will be. But the evidence is the photos. The photos speak for themselves. Let's watch some more.
She's at the South Shore Hospital. She had wonderful care and treatment that was able, against her will, to save her life. Fake suicide, little scratches, dinky little scratches. This is a photograph that was taken at the South Shore Hospital of her neck. Photograph taken of her wrist showing the split in the skin. Photograph showing you'll see evidence of this, the bedroom floor next to the bed with the blood. The knife next to the cup. Sadly, a gift saying because kids. You see the white residue inside the cup? That's where the pills were crushed up with leftover lemonade from the night before when she consumed that. That's the knife. This here you'll see is sleep aids. See this here, deep sleep pillow spray. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't sleep for months. More photographs of the injuries to her neck. And then, in the course of the fake suicide speculation by the police, you'll see the evidence that she hung on the window ledge and, like Spider-Man, I guess, slid down the wall of the house. You're going to hear evidence that she flung and threw herself out the window, striking her head on the ground, full ground, causing what's known as a Jefferson fracture of her neck. She shattered, exploded her thoracic spine, shattered her cervical spine, the first disc, broke every rib. And the Jefferson fracture, you'll hear evidence, is not consistent with a fake suicide by any means. Jefferson fracture is consistent with Superman when he got thrown off the horse. It's consistent with people that have the tragedy where they dive into a swimming pool, as a result of which they get that fracture in their neck and they're paralyzed. She's paralyzed. She's not going to get up miraculously and walk out of this courtroom. She's paralyzed and will be paralyzed for the rest of her life. She's living her own hell. She knows what happened with those kids.
Wow. couple of things, right? Creating the sympathy factor for his client, diverting a little bit of the attention away from the 3 dead children, back to her client, the life she's living, what happened to her, but doing it in a way where it doesn't seem like it's a cheap shot, because he's talking about an allegation by prosecutors that this wasn't a real suicide attempt. This is a strong issue for him, so you can see how he is focusing a lot of time on it in his opening statement. So I want to take a look at more of the opening statement by Kevin Reddington, because the issues that he is talking about is really what this trial will be about. This trial is about the defense. Yes, prosecutors have to prove it and they have to disprove the defense in this case. But this case is about one issue and one issue only, which is the mental state of the defendant. And how do you prove it? How do you get to it? So let's listen to more of Kevin Reddington's theory of what he believes the evidence will show and what was going through the mind of his client at the time that she took the lives of her 3 children. Let's watch.
This is a young woman that, with her husband, tried very hard to get the help she needed. She went and saw a doctor by the name of, oh, by the way, remember in the opening, the government says she shopped around for doctors, I guess, that she wanted to get doctors to, I don't know, give her drugs or something. You can hear evidence that she went online and she looked for someone that was into neonatal or post-baby delivery, because she knew that she was in trouble. She couldn't sleep. She had insomnia. It wasn't just, when you get up in the middle of the night because your phone's on. She couldn't sleep. She'd only get 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night if she's lucky, as time went on. In September, she went to see Dr. Tufts. Jennifer Tufts is the name of the doctor. Jennifer Tufts then gave her a prescription for Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. It's one of those SSRIs. She didn't take the Zoloft for a couple of weeks because she was breastfeeding. She was afraid to have the baby have anything to do with drugs, but ultimately couldn't do it any longer, took the Zoloft, and was spun out of control. Well, because you didn't hear evidence because she was bipolar. You don't give a bipolar person Zoloft, but she got it. You're going to see what the effect was that it had on her as that week went on, as that month drove on, and she couldn't sleep, and she was unable to emote, had no emotions, had no feelings, was unable to really react to anything, but had to take care of the kids. And as the government says, well, she was able to talk to people. She was able to talk to neighbors. Sure, you're going to hear, because they don't call them, we're going to call them. People that knew Lindsay as a mother, people that knew Lindsay, teachers of those kids will indicate what kind of a mother she was. As will neighbors, as will friends, as will people that saw her during that period of time. And you're going to hear evidence from Patrick as to the effect that this sickness had on her. She was looking into it. You're going to see her Google searches. You're going to see her Google searches go on and on and on about how to take care of postpartum. What type of drugs? Can you become addicted to benzodiazepines? What about, is it possible to have a treatment, a ketamine treatment? What do I do as far as insomnia? What do I do about my thoughts to kill myself? Ways to kill. How do you kill? What do you do to kill? Government lashes onto that. Oh my God, she's looking up ways to kill. Let's make that a basis of our prosecution on this case. This is not a righteous prosecution. They're looking for every single piece of evidence that they can to show some ridiculous concept that she wanted to kill her beautiful kids because she didn't want to be a mother anymore. During that period of time, you can see that on December 20th and 22nd, she was evaluated at the Women's and Infants Partial Hospitalization Program in Rhode Island. December 30th, she returned to Mass General Hospital emergency room. December 31st, that's after Mass General told her to go to the hospital, you can go to McLean. New Year's Eve, December 20th of 22, they were admitted to McLean Hospital for psychiatric treatment. January 6th of 23 was post-discharge follow-up appointment with Dr. Tufts. January 10, 16, and 23, appointment Dr. Tufts, Dr. Tufts, Dr. Tufts. The day before the killings, Dr. Tufts. These are the medications that she was on, that she had filled. that she took, that she didn't take, and apparently, according to the opening statement by the government, was manipulating the doctors, not telling the doctors. She told them that she was suicidal. She told them that she had suicidal ideation, and in December, to his and her ever dying regret, told Patrick in the presence of her mother that she was having psychosis, thoughts of hurting the children. This is a woman that did not get the medication, did not get the medical treatment that she so deserved. This is a woman that was suffering from psychosis at the time that she went down to that basement. She had no motive. She loved her children. She intended to kill herself. She didn't fake that. Threw herself out the window. Goes to the hospital. You're going to see that when she's in the hospital, they said to her, you want to, what do you call it, a DNR? Do not resuscitate or whatever. Absolutely. Did not want any DNR. Didn't want to be resuscitated, wanted to die. To this day wants to die. That's what we're dealing with on this prosecution.
See the way he looks at the prosecutor? Like, he works the room, right? Really good. Great communicator, all of that. But you see the themes here now, what this case is going to be about. It's going to be about the doctors. Didn't realize she was bipolar, giving her the wrong medication. She's reaching out for help. She's telling everybody about her thoughts. She's telling everyone. And she's not getting the help she needed. It's someone else's fault for not treating her. You can't hold her criminally responsible. This is going to be a long trial. It's not going to be a short one. Obviously, we'll be able to watch it on Court TV, and we'll be going through the big moments here on Vinnie Politan Investigates, trying to parse through everything that happens. But this is going to be a hard-fought, hotly contested case to diametrically opposed views of this woman and why she killed her 3 children.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for being with us this Tuesday afternoon as jury selection is happening now in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's where we are this hour, waiting for that jury to be seated in the trial for Lindsay Clancy. She's a defendant accused of fatally strangling her 3 children. But her legal team argues that severe postpartum psychosis is what rendered her incapable of understanding right from wrong and that her actions were criminal, mounting a rare defense centered on acute mental illness. Currently, we have 7 jurors that have been seated, looking for a panel of 18, which would be 12 plus those 6 alternates. Before we get into the discussion of what's happening there on the ground in Massachusetts, let's take a look back at the facts of this case. Here's Court TV anchor Ted Rowlands.
Just after 6 o'clock on the evening of January 24th, 2023, first responders rushed to a home in Duxbury, Massachusetts for an attempted suicide call. Patrick Clancy had returned home from picking up food and found his wife Lindsay on the ground outside. According to investigators, she had cuts to her neck and her wrists and had jumped from a 2nd-floor window. As paramedics tended to Lindsay, Patrick went inside to check on the couple's 3 small children. 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Kaylin were in the basement, turning blue.
Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks.
Cora and Dawson died that night. Little baby Kaylin was rushed to Boston's Children's Hospital and died days later. Lindsay, who previously worked as a labor and delivery nurse, survived but was paralyzed from the waist down. Prosecutors allege that Lindsay is a cold and calculating killer. They say she researched how to kill and planned the details of the murder precisely. Investigators say she intentionally sent her husband to pick up dinner from a restaurant far enough away to give her time to carry out her plan. Lindsay's defense says she's not criminally responsible because she was suffering from a postpartum mental health crisis. They claim in the weeks before the incident that she was over-medicated with a cocktail of potent prescriptions, including Zoloft, Valium, Trazodone, Ativan, Klonopin, Prozac, and Seroquel. Patrick Clancy told police that just 3 weeks prior to the children's death, Lindsay had checked herself into a mental health facility after telling him and her psychiatrist that she had thoughts of harming herself and her children. Patrick says he forgives his wife and asks others to do the same, writing on a GoFundMe about the real Lindsay, quote, "The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace." Lindsay Clancy is charged with 3 counts of murder and could spend the rest of her life behind bars if convicted.
We are standing by as there have been over 100 people that have reported to this courthouse for jury selection. And on the ground there for us, we are joined now by Sierra Gillespie, who is the host of Scandal, a podcast on Law and Crimes Network. She is also there in front of the courthouse, has been there all morning. You've got a seat inside. Sierra, thanks so much for joining us again. Give us an update. What's the latest that you have seen there at this courthouse?
Yeah, Julia, thanks for having me on today. And things are slow moving here in Plymouth County, and kind of understandably, right? I mean, they want 18 jurors seated for this really, really heavy case. So both sides are being pretty methodical about their questions that they're asking. They're going through and meeting person and person, asking them question after question. A lot of people are being excused because maybe they have, some sort of scheduling conflict, or they have an illness, or sometimes people have said, I just don't think I can be impartial on a case like this. But as it stands right now, when I left the courtroom just about 15 minutes ago to get set up for this live shot, we have 7 jurors who are seated. Majority are women, but it's pretty close. There's 4 women, 3 men, and we're slowly moving closer to that magic 18 number.
Yeah, and I've loved how you've explained for our viewers exactly what this process is like, because jury selection can happen in different ways, and it's not necessarily that all these jurors are moving through different rounds, and at the end, these attorneys will use their strikes on a pool, but there's actually a bit of secrecy here. Can you walk us through how these jurors are being questioned, whether it's in front of everyone or away from the cameras and from reporters?
Yeah, let me break it down for you, because you're right, Julia. I haven't personally seen another jury selection that's similar to this. It's kind of interesting. So here's what happens. This morning, we come in. It's all of the jurors that are prospective group number 1. I would say, 50 to 75 people. Everybody has their little juror number. I'm juror number 112, whatever it may be. And the judge reads aloud and says, okay, I'm going to list a series of questions. If you guys, if this qualifies for you, raise your hand. So he would ask things like, do you know Lindsay Clancy and her family? Do you have any sort of, religious background or something of the like that would make you unfit to serve on this jury? This is going to be a 6 to 8 week trial. Can you make it for that? So people would raise their hands, but they wouldn't be stricken right then. They would mark it down. The judge and, both sides would mark it down. After that, everyone was taken to a different room. So we as the media were all asked to leave. They were handed out a questionnaire that had about 7 to 8 questions. Now, we've tried to get our hands on this, and the judge says, no way, we are not making this public. However, the jury does get a heads up on at least the witness list, because, this is a small community. We're in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It's very likely that some of these people know each other. So the jurors have to take a look at this entire witness list and say, yes, I know this person. No, I don't know this person, kind of mark it off. After all of that process is over, then the jurors come in one by one and stand in front of the court. So we have the judge, we have both sides, the prosecution, the Commonwealth, and the defense, and then Lindsay Clancy herself. These prospective jurors are standing, a yard away from Lindsay Clancy herself, answering questions. Do I have a medical illness? Oh, some people say, hey, you know what? I'm a college student. I'm not going to be able to be here for 2 months. Actually, can I be excused? I actually saw another woman who was literally crying. She had a box of Kleenex with her. She was cleaning up the tears under her eyes because she was so moved by this case and said, can I please be taken off? I don't want to be a prospective juror. I don't think I can be impartial. Now, we're not supposed to hear all of this. They actually play white noise so that we can't. However, I was in the front row, so I was listening as close as I could. Some things I made out, some things I didn't, but that's kind of the lengthy process that everyone's going to seat this jury.
Wow, it's interesting to hear how emotional some of these jurors have gotten. I've been in jury selections where there's a death of a baby, and there are people, they haven't heard about the case. They're not biased because of the pretrial publicity. They're biased because they say, I simply cannot sit here and listen to a case that involves the death of a children. I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent, I just can't do it. There was a bit of a back and forth. You've been taking great notes for us, your team there on the ground. And I also want to comment, Sierra, I know you're out here, so you can't get this information, but you normally would. We understand now there have been 8 jurors that have been seated there. 5 men, 3 women. If I have that correct, I'm double checking with our producers, and I know 3 men, 5 women. I had that inverse. So 3 men, 5 women, 8 jurors seated. And I understand before you were able to come out and talk to us, Sierra, there was a young man in his 20s who was being questioned, and the judge had an objection to how he was being questioned. Can you fill us in on that one?
Yeah, okay, so I really thought that this young man, honestly, he looked like a boy. He could have just graduated high school. He looked so young. I truly thought that he was going to be seated on this jury because they were asking him questions, both sides, the prosecution, the Commonwealth, and the defense, for honestly probably close to 20 minutes. I thought that they were just, vetting him, making sure, can you be impartial? That's actually one of the questions that they asked this man, can you be impartial? He said, yes, I can. And yet, he was asked to move to the side. Now, this is where things get interesting. You know how I told you the white noise was going? Well, I could hear over that. That's because the judge here literally raised his voice and was scolding both sides and said, hey, you know what? This isn't about emotion. We don't want to ask these prospective jurors, how are you feeling? What are your thoughts on this? We don't care about that. Put that aside. We need to know whether they can follow the instructions. That's what all of this is about here. We need to know if they can follow and be impartial. That's it. The emotion, set it aside. And so there was some back and forth between all of that. They brought the young man, I'll call him, because honestly, he looks like a high school graduate recently. They brought him back, and then they said, okay, you're free to go. And that was it. So I don't know, after that, I had to run right out here, and I guess another juror was seated, so maybe things got a little less tense after that. But it was interesting to hear the yelling literally as the judge was hovering over Lindsay Clancy, the defendant herself.
This is a case that is no doubt going to flare some emotions, not just for the victim's family and the people inside the courtroom and the jurors, but even the parties. Sierra, stand by. Thank you for that insight from there at the courthouse in Plymouth County, Massachusetts.
During this call, the defendant stated that after he left the house that night, she killed the kids because she heard a voice and had, quote, a moment of psychosis, end quote. He asked her what voices she heard, and she said she heard a man's voice telling her to kill the kids and kill herself because it was her last chance. Patrick Clancy told the police the defendant had never heard voices before. He also told the police the defendant had never used the word psychosis to him before.
In January of 2023, Patrick Clancy returned home from a quick errand to find his wife severely injured and his 3 children unconscious in their basement. All 3 young children later died, sparking a tragic murder case that has captured national attention. Prosecution here is expected to play that heartbreaking 911 call that Patrick made during the trial. And the public hasn't heard that call yet, but in earlier hearings, the prosecution described what would be on it.
When EMS arrived, he asked them to stay with her so he could go find his kids. The 911 call kept going. Patrick can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children. His screams seem to get louder and more agonized as the time passes. Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them.
Let's bring back in Sierra Gillespie, who is there on the ground in Massachusetts, live at the courthouse. We also have with us forensic psychiatrist Dr. Carol Lieberman and former deputy public defender in LA County, Philip Dubé. Sierra, I'm going to start with you. I understand things have changed inside of the courtroom in terms of jury selection. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Julia, we're now at Eight jurors have been seated. They have broken for lunch break now, so they're going out, doing whatever they may do, grabbing lunch really quick, then coming back at about 2 p.m. ET. Now, I know, because I was kind of eavesdropping in the courtroom, as is my job as a reporter, okay? And what I heard is that any of the jurors that were seated, the judge said, okay, thank you so much, glad to have you. Why don't you come back on Thursday? So that to me indicates that potentially they're going to continue today with jury selection, likely tomorrow, Wednesday, and they're hoping, fingers crossed, that opening statements would be presented on Thursday. Now, things are kind of slow moving. I mean, we're at number 8. We have 10 more jurors that need to be seated, but it sounds to me like they are hoping for openings on Thursday. And I guess if we want to talk about the breakdown of the jurors here, it is majority women, at least right now. So it's 5 women, 3 men, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
And Dr. Carol Lieberman, let me follow up with you. We tried to talk about it in the last block, so let's talk about it now. This gender breakdown, what do you think that means for a case like this?
It's not as easy as one might think. In other words, the first idea that you might have is that, oh, well, more women is good because they would be able to understand her. But that isn't always the case. Sometimes there is sort of a backlash from women. Particularly if it's a woman who had children and she didn't have postpartum psychosis, or there can be various things in the women's own experience that would make them unconsciously, at least, turn against her. So it's not cut and dry. You really have to know more about each of them.
And Dr. Lieberman, I'm going to follow up with you and talk about what we just listened to. Patrick Clancy, not only the father of the 3 young victims in this case, but also the then husband of the defendant. He's in a particularly difficult position. He is no doubt going to be called as a witness, but can you talk about how conflicting this can be, especially when we understand from reports, from statements he's made, that he doesn't necessarily support the prosecution of Lindsay Clancy, that he forgives her and hopes that she can find peace?
Right. He is very much on her side. He does forgive her. I mean, of course, that must have been incredibly horrible to discover your children, especially with the bands around their necks still and all of that. And that's going to be very emotional for the prosecution. That's going to be very effective with the jury. But, she was a nurse, a maternity nurse. She loved her children. I'm sure there are going to be lots of witnesses who will talk about how much she loved her children and all that. This is an illness. This is a mental illness. This is a known mental illness, postpartum psychosis. And the fact that she was having hallucinations, telling her to kill her children so that she could kill herself because she wouldn't want to leave them alone without her, being there to be their mother. I mean, it's all very believable, credible. The people who should be on the defense, sitting with the defense, should also be the doctors who totally missed the case.
We're going to be talking about that more soon. But, Philip, I want to talk to you about some statements that Patrick Clancy went on the record with the New Yorker in an article that was written back in 2024. He's, of course, expected to be a key witness in this trial. Despite this tragic loss, as we mentioned, he told reporters that he wasn't married to a monster. He was married to someone who got sick. And he also stated in that interview that there's no house anymore. There are no kids. All that's left is me and Lindsay. If I could go back in time, I'd have called McLean and said, take her away, lock the door, keep her in there for a year if you have to, talking about the mental health institution. Lindsay misses her kids, he went on to say, which I know sounds crazy to some people, but that's the reality. What are we going to expect to hear from Patrick Clancy on the stand? Is he going to be a state and defense witness? Is he just going to be a state witness with cross-examination by the defense? What do you think?
A lot of it depends on how much leeway the court gives defense counsel on cross-examination. If the court severely limits what defense counsel can ask, then what will likely happen after he testifies for the state, that he will be called or recalled in the defense case in chief. And as I said in the earlier block, the husband is going to be the greatest and the best historian of her psychiatric frailties for the jury. Remember, he was in the home, obviously, while they were dating, before they got married. after the first child was born, after the second child was born, after the third child was born. He knows and saw firsthand how she behaved around her children, how doting and loving she was on her children, and the symptoms associated with the condition and how they materialized and how she started to get treatment for it. So the fact that he is this historian, if you will, of everything that she endured, I think paints a better clinical picture for her, for the jury.
Sierra, let me bring you back into the conversation. You've been following this case from the very beginning. Patrick is a central figure in all of this. Have you seen him at the courthouse? Do you think that he's going to be sitting in the gallery? There are some rules of sequestration for witnesses, but he is the victim's father, and oftentimes the judge will give an allowance for a victim to be able to sit inside of the courtroom. But what are you hearing and what have you observed based on past hearings?
Yeah, when I was coming here this morning, that was the #1 person that I was looking out for. Is Patrick Clancy here? Especially since you referenced that really famous article now where he says, you know, this isn't Lindsay. She had a mental break. This is not her. She loved her children. I stand by her. I forgive her. I had my eyes out for Patrick Clancy. I have not seen him. He is not here today, not in the courtroom, nothing like that. But I will say, behind Lindsay Clancy, she does have some support. Namely, she has her 2 parents, and then, of course, her grandmother is there, too. They're in the second row behind Lindsay. And I actually saw them, and they were walking out of the courthouse at the same time as I did. They held the door for me. They were very, pleasant, just unassuming, normal people. And I heard them say, oh, let's just stretch our legs. It's going to be kind of a long day. So they're definitely feeling it too. So she's got her parents, her grandmother there as well. And then in front of them, in front of the family, is 2 nurses, because we can't forget in all of this the fact that Lindsay Clancy, after she murdered her 3 young children, strangled them with exercise bands, she jumped out of a 2nd-story window and ever since has been paralyzed from the waist down. She is in a wheelchair. So right behind her, I mean, that alone is a very vast or interesting topic to talk about. But right behind her are those 2 nurses that are there, if she needs anything, if anything goes wrong, whatever. So she's being constantly monitored. But however, back to the start of the question, no Patrick Clancy as of yet.
That is fascinating insight, Sierra, especially about the nurses being there to care for her, because it's quite a showing that she is there in that wheelchair. The jurors no doubt are going to take note of that. They're already taking note of it in the jury selection.
Around December 6, 2022, did Lindsay tell you she was starting a new medication?
I don't remember specifically.
Is it that you don't remember the date, or you don't remember her starting a new medication?
I'm not sure.
Do you remember Lindsay telling you at some point she was starting the medication Seroquel?
Yes.
Do you remember around what time frame that was?
I thought it was before December 6th.
Okay. And do you recall how she was physically after starting the Seroquel?
Awful.
How so?
That was really where her big spiral started. She started to lose a lot of weight, and she became very depressed, and she was having a really hard time.
And did she describe to you some thoughts or feelings that she was having at that time?
Yeah, she started to say she was suicidal.
And was that in December of 2022?
I think so, yeah.
And when she told you she was suicidal, did you ask her if she had a plan on how to kill herself?
Yes.
And what was her response?
She said no.
And did she ever mention a specific way or plan she had to kill herself to you?
No.
And at some point in time, did she tell you that this was the first time she had had suicidal thoughts?
I don't know if she mentioned it was the first time or not. I just remember her saying she had them.
Had you ever heard her say that to you before, that she was having suicidal thoughts?
No.
Did you own at that time a Surface Pro, a type of tablet that works as a laptop?
Yeah.
And who had access to that laptop?
We both did.
You and Lindsay?
Yeah.
And going back to August 22nd, 2022, did you click on a link on that Surface Pro that was titled Methods of Suicide?
Not that I recall.
And August 22nd, 2022, that was before Lindsay had been on any medications, as far as you know, correct?
Correct.
Going back to December, she's told you that she's having these thoughts. What's your reaction when she tells you that she's having these suicidal thoughts?
I just wanted to support her. I asked those questions back to her, and her mother was coming up pretty regularly anyways, so we let them know, and we just tried to be supportive.
Did she also tell you at that time, at the beginning of December, that she was having some other intrusive thoughts?
Yeah.
Is that how she described them or how you described them, intrusive thoughts?
I would say both.
Okay. And when she told you that she was having intrusive thoughts, did you ask her what they were?
Yeah.
And what was her response?
She described thoughts of hurting the kids or them having some sort of ailment. So like she was very worried that Cora had, whenever she had a stomach ache, she became overly worried that she was, had like a liver problem or something much more dramatic than it was.
Okay. But going back to that first part, she said she had thoughts of harming the kids. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And did she tell you whether or not she had specific thoughts of how she would harm the kids?
No.
And she didn't describe that as hearing this external voice telling her to harm the kids, correct?
Correct.
She told you she was having intrusive thoughts herself of harming the children, correct?
Correct.
And did you ask her how she was going to harm the kids?
I didn't ask it in that way. It was the same thing. I said, do you have a plan, and is it disturbing to you? And she said no, and then she said yes. And
let me go back for a minute there. You said, do you have a plan? And she said no. What was the second question? Second part of the question?
Do you find it disturbing? Okay. And she said yes. And she described it as really the way she was describing it as something that might happen to the kids.
So it was more something might happen than she might do something. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And did she tell you how long she had those thoughts for?
She didn't give a duration.
And how many times did she tell you this, that she had thoughts of harming the kids?
A couple times.
And was that a couple times over the course of a night or two in December?
Yeah.
Okay. And as a result of her telling you this, that she had thoughts of harming the kids, what did you do?
Her parents came up, and I think I asked her at some point, do you feel like you need to be kept away from them? And she said no. And then, it was very confusing because a minute later she was making them lunch or playing with them or, getting them ready for bed or whatever it was.
So it was confusing in that she wasn't physically harming them at the time, but was had these thoughts. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I never saw Lindsay harm the kids.
And did you also, as a result of these statements, suggest an appointment with nurse practitioner Gelada?
It wasn't as a result of these statements. That appointment was set up because we were at her parents' house in Wallingford for Thanksgiving, and she just described how she was feeling on the medication, and she felt that she was addicted to them.
Was that the benzodiazepines that she thought she was addicted to?
Primarily, and then she was taking Seroquel at the same time, and she might have been taking Trazodone or Remeron, I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you recall testifying previously that I called her parents to come up to stay with us, And I told her that I asked her who her doctor was because I was very concerned at this point. She was prescribed 10 different medications in just over 2 months, so it didn't make sense to me. And then you said, so after her parents came up, she said, I have a remote meeting with Rebecca Gelada, and you said, no, it has to be in person.
Yeah, I felt like it had to be in person because I just felt like there was a disconnect. I felt like we could figure it out, whatever was going on. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like most of her telehealth appointments were pretty quick, and there just wasn't like a lot of attention.
Were you present for these telehealth visits?
Only a few of them, okay. And they were after that meeting with Gelada.
Okay. And that appointment in person with Gelada was December 6, 2022, is that correct?
That sounds correct.
So the thought of harming the kids was after Thanksgiving, but before December 6th, is that correct?
That sounds correct.
Were you concerned for the kids' safety at that time?
No, I wasn't.
And why not?
Because she wasn't showing any intention of harming the kids.
And she told you she didn't have a plan, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, directing your attention to December 15th, 2022, did Lindsay go to Mass General Hospital to the emergency department that day?
Yeah.
Okay, and why was that?
I remember the reasoning being she told her dad that she wanted to commit suicide, and then she said to me, I told my dad I want to die, and it didn't bother me at all.
And as a result of those statements, you brought her, or did she bring herself to Mass General?
I think I brought her that time.
And at Mass General, she saw medical staff, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And did they recommend to her some type of admission to McLean Hospital?
I remember there was one doctor who was in favor of that, and there were two others who were more in favor of a day program.
Okay. And did they give you information about a specific day program?
Yeah, it was Women and Infants in Providence.
And at that time, when Lindsay was saying that she was suicidal, was she asked if she had a plan?
By the doctors.
Or by you?
I was always checking in with her, and she never told me that she had a plan. I'm not sure what the doctors asked her.
Okay. And after being at Mass General on December 15th, did she go to Women and Infants Hospital in Rhode Island to attempt to get into their postpartum program?
She was already in. She went in as scheduled.
Okay. And but she didn't remain in, correct? She was just there for a day?
Correct.
Okay. And did she go by herself? Did you go with her?
I dropped her off, and then I took Dawson skiing.
Okay. And at some point in time, did Lindsay reach out to you to say she wasn't staying at the program and to come pick her up?
She actually said that the providers at that program suggested to her that she call me and have her come get picked up, and then that I should go in and meet with the providers.
Okay. And then after you picked her up, she was no longer in the program at that point, correct? At Rhode Island Women and Children's, right?
Well, we discussed it with the doctors, and their recommendation was that the program wasn't right for her.
Right. And so you guys returned home, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And during this time frame in December, Lindsay's still working out at the Kingsbury Club, correct?
That might be true. I don't recall exactly, but yeah.
Okay. Do you recall her going to the Kingsbury Club on December 6th, 13th, 16th, 17th, or 18th?
I mean, I believe that can be true. Yeah, I don't recall those exact dates, but yeah.
At this time when she's saying that she's feeling suicidal, she's telling you she doesn't have a plan, correct?
Mm-hmm.
She's no longer saying she has any thoughts of harming the children, correct?
Correct.
She's still bringing the children to doctor's appointments during that time, right?
Yeah.
Do you recall her bringing Callan and Dawson to the doctors on December 2nd when they weren't feeling well?
Yeah.
And then she was able to call the doctor's office on December 27th and make an appointment for Callan and Cora when they weren't feeling well. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. And take them to the doctor, I believe with you, correct?
Maybe. I don't know.
And then on December 30th, she was able to take Callan to the doctor that day as well and interact with the staff. Is that correct?
Probably.
Then you returned to Mass General Hospital, the emergency department, on December 31st. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why did you go back on the 31st?
Because she was still talking about thoughts of suicide, and I was exhausted. I said, I think it's time to go to McLean, and we didn't have a diagnosis, so we just didn't really know what was wrong. And I think for me, I was hoping that McLean could really evaluate her and try to figure out the best path forward.
Okay, so the path to getting to McLean was to go to the emergency department at Mass General and be referred to McLean. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that night while at the hospital, Lindsay was taking selfies?
No.
Right, that may be admitted, or they may be admitted.
Can you exhibit me taking a selfie at the hospital? Is that correct?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And then the second page is just her legs in the doorway. Is that correct?
Yep.
As a result of going to Mass General and telling them about her suicidal thoughts, was she transferred to McLean Hospital?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you stay with her throughout that transfer process, or were you able to?
I was not able to. For some reason, they transfer. I don't know if they do this with all patients, but she was transferred at 3 a.m.
Okay. And so she reached McLean in the early morning hours of January 1st, then, of 2023. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you visit her at McLean Hospital?
Yeah.
How often did you see her there?
I think I was able to go twice, or maybe 3 times.
Okay. And do you remember, what visiting hours were or what hours you visited?
I don't remember exactly, but it was, something like 2 to 6. And I think there were morning hours, but you couldn't just go anytime.
You couldn't or could?
You could not.
Okay. And so you, out of the few days that she was there, 5 days she was there, you visited 2 or 3 times. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And while you were there with her, did Lindsay talk to you about the treatment that she was receiving at McLean Hospital?
She told me about her experience. It didn't really seem like she was getting any treatment.
Okay. Did she tell you that she wasn't really getting any treatment or wasn't getting as much care or treatment as she wanted?
Well, I think by the 3rd day, I said, what have the doctors said? And she said, I haven't met with the doctor. The challenge was she arrived on a Saturday, And then I think Monday was an observed holiday, so she didn't see a doctor until Tuesday. So until then, she was coloring and playing with clay and going for walks.
Were you aware that she was seen by a resident, a doctor, the first 2 days she was there, and then an attending on the third day that she was there?
No.
Were you aware that she was seen by a licensed social worker, group therapist, and other mental health workers every day while she was there?
Yeah, I didn't get any updates.
Okay. Were you aware that she was offered one-on-one therapy by unit staff every day that she was there?
No.
Did you know that she participated in group therapy on January 1st for 45 minutes, a session about illness and symptom management?
I was aware of some group activities. I didn't know the details of it.
Okay. And were you aware that she participated in 2 group therapy sessions, one for 45 minutes and one for 50 minutes, one on self-compassion and one on illness and symptom management on January 3rd?
I wasn't aware of the subject of any of the meetings now.
Were you aware that she declined further group therapy and treatment in the afternoon of January 3rd?
No.
Were you aware that on January 4th she participated in a group for 40 minutes called medication management?
No.
Were you aware that she participated in a group on January 5th on expressive therapy for 45 minutes?
No.
And were you aware that she declined further treatment 2 times on January 5th, one to attend group therapy and one to attend a session on cognitive behavioral processes?
No.
Were you aware that Lindsay asked the doctors to be discharged on the 6th, Friday the 6th, because she wanted to go to Cora's birthday party on the 7th?
Not that I recall.
Were you aware, or did Lindsay tell you that she then asked the doctors to discharge her on January 5th because she wanted to go home and get ready for the party?
I wasn't aware of Lindsay asking the doctors to be discharged.